We carried this energy across waves, stored it in our palms for 90 plus days until we greeted new greens that introduced themselves to us with joy, telling us their deadly, life-giving secrets. They too had prepared themselves for this work, prepared themselves for our coming. Bakra called this union magic, witchcraft, we call it science. They called it of the devil because we give them hell. As our dance feet kiss the soil, we conjured the ultimate reward for our daily toil. We are the target of the first war for oil. Isle of freedom, Isle of runway and can't find, Isle of bundong plantation, Isle of kill master dead, Isle of barren the mistress Sophia picking no live for come slave for me. We unleash this energy, they demonized it. Us. How else could they describe the images crawling through the nightmares that shattered them sleepless? What in truth they saw was justice, beautiful in its terror. But how have we come to see terror in the beauty we conjure? So much so we dare not speak its name, except through whispers in desperate times and story for frightened picnic. But who has patience for challenge a mama to a fruit of womb? This energy is stored and awaiting its full bloom. And when we are ready, the greens will greet us again with joy, and a new reign of beautiful terror shall commence.
And there you are.
What's the Wi-Fi password?
Oh, it's Hack Me.
Are you serious? The play
Grounded. There will be no barriers between I and I, Muma. Asasea, some of us knew you by a different name. Coming from the heart of our nation, felt the rhythm of the universe and harnessed the vibration. Translated through sound pattern. Who could deny their body the freedom of this movement? Arms in supplication to the sun, feet caress the earth. We dance balance in the universe, while captors perverted our world. We kept our souls free, knowing our bodies would join us soon. I know, in this essence I grow, kept my manhood housed in this rhythm, knowing the world could never find it there. Unleashed it, circumambulating I woman in celebration of all that she is, because I knew her divinity, knew she was the portal and I the key, knew this world was governed by the demon of separation, knew liberation depended entirely upon our connection, knew our harmony had to be kept secret, whispered in this symbolic code of synchronized bodies, praying our children never lose this language, knowing if they do, the code will rediscover them, and those who have ears will hear us in the rhythm, calling I back to ourself, calling I forward to ourself. Through I rhythm, I and I preserve harmony in the midst of destruction. Through I rhythm, I know I self. Through I self, I know creation.
Well, yes, microphone check 1 2 1 2 1 2. That's my microphone check. So that's making sure that ones and ones can hear. So if you can hear me, please leave a signal in the chat, please. Yeah, just let me know so I can be heard before I go forward any further, please. To anybody locked on right about now, please let me know if I'm audible, yeah, through the microphone right about now. I'm checking my levels, and my levels look like them good, so you should be hearing me. I just want a confirmation that I can be heard from any of the brothers and sisters locked on right now. I'm gonna await that confirmation before I get in at the thing proper. So yeah, man, come true, family. You know what I'm saying? I'd like to hear if I can be heard. And yeah, welcome for those who may not be aware. Well, most of you, if you're locked in, would be aware that my name is Shakara, and among many other things, yeah, I am a student of African spiritual systems, and so that is one of the focuses of my work through this channel, to minister and administer things that I learn and studied. Give thanks X, yeah, you know what I'm saying, whenever it's the third time lucky, so I can be heard. All right, cool. So we're going to begin by saying Tendai Mwadi, spoken in the Shona language of Zimbabwe, which basically means be thankful unto the mother, father, creative force of the universe. Kudzai Mudzimu Mukuru, give praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodie, African power and African liberation for all African people. Yeah. And so I want to welcome you, yeah, Kwaba, welcome to this particular extra special session. And as you can see, well, I've titled it various different things: KIMOYO and African sovereignty, African spirituality, and African liberation are the varying titles that I'm giving this presentation. I've delivered it on a couple of occasions, yeah, over the last couple years. And at one event, yeah, that was hosted by Gotkush TV, that was on spirituality, and then in collaboration with my brother Dali and Adolfo of Ancestral Voices, and my sister Michelle Santewa, yeah, we delivered a presentation about transformation, and so this was my contribution to that. And so what has inspired me to do this now is the fact that a couple weeks ago now, I happened to receive a notification from Sarnetta TV, yeah, Sarnetta TV, and there was a conversation being facilitated on African spirituality, yeah, and Black liberation. All right, and I found that to be a very interesting conversation, and there have been many conversations that have been spawned since then, from, you know, as flowered, yeah, from that conversation. And I felt that I had a positive contribution, yeah, to make to that particular discourse. All right, and so I've been contemplating whether to drop this presentation again ever since then, and the discourse since then has convinced me of the need to throw this in the, you know, this particular contribution amidst the other contributions that are there. Now, obviously, like within the, you know, that you know, the Sarnetta verse, so to speak, I'm relatively a small fish in terms of audience. All right, but I hope ones and ones get something from this anyway, because I believe it is very, very important as African people for us to have a proper and a true and a comprehensive understanding of our indigenous spiritual systems, because it is arguable that nothing, yeah, in this world as we know it has been subject to more distortion, revisionism, denigration, and degradation, kings and queens. All right, so assuming everybody can still hear me and my mic levels are good, I don't want to waste any more time. I want to get into the thing, and so in getting into the thing, I'm going to share my screen nice and easy. Oh, let me close this down, and that one too. And we're gonna get into some science. All right. So let's get into some science. Whilst you're here, kings and queens, as you're coming through, yeah, you know, click up the like, yeah, hit the like button, and all of these things. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And share the video far and wide. Share the video far and wide. You know what I mean? You know, if you feel that somebody might be interested in what is about to be dropped, please feel free to share it. And once I'm done, maybe I'll share the link. Yeah, maybe I'll share the link and we can see what I go on. All right. Let's see. I'm gonna share that one there. Share that one there. Share that one there. Yep. So now share. All right. So we are here once again. For anybody locked in, locked on, please let me know if you can see the screen. Yeah, you should be able to. It's showing from my side, but I want to make sure. So just give me a confirmation. Yeah, if my screen is visible and all of these things. All right. But in the meantime, I'm gonna go forward and I'm gonna hit the present button. All right. So KIMOYO, yeah, for now, yeah, all you need to know is that it's a place, it's a term that is being used to replace the terminology African spirituality. Yeah, we're not discarding African spirituality, but it is believed, yeah, and understood, I should say, that the term KIMOYO gives us greater expression in terms of what we mean by African spirituality. Yeah. And a description, a definition of KIMOYO will be given in the presentation. But you can see that we're dealing with the concept of KIMOYO or African spirituality and its relationship to African liberation or African sovereignty or Black liberation, the freedom fight, yeah, or struggle, quote unquote, of Black people or African people. All right. And this discourse has been a relevant one ever since, yeah, the first invader came to Mama Africa and decided that our spiritual traditions were pagan or heathen, yeah, or kuffar or shirk. Yeah, it has been a conversation ever since we were told that we were benighted barbarians that could only be saved by Christian grace. It has been a topic of conversation ever since we were trafficked across the Atlantic, and our spiritual systems were denigrated and marginalized and banned in many cases, and we were punished and tortured for speaking a word of our languages and practicing any of our rituals, engaging in any of our rituals. And it has been a topic of conversation that has permeated practically every stage and every effort of African liberation. All right, the African Liberation Fight, which is our resistance, yeah, against the forces of oppression in whatever form they have been imposed upon us as African people. So it is of no, surprise that this continues, yeah, to be a topic of conversation in today's world. However, I've begun to realize the extent to which certain perspectives, yeah, especially within what is referred to as the conscious community, are very much lacking, yeah, among many of us. And so I'm hoping to do justice to an African-centered approach to African spirituality and African sovereignty. And I hope ones and ones understand what that means. Now, this presentation is very much in line with a series that I did previously entitled KIMOYO, the KIMOYO series, yeah, which you'll find in my playlist. And really, it's a distillation of mostly the first and the last presentation in that series, yeah. With some embellishments here and there. So there are things here that you're not going to find in that series, yeah? And I'll explain as I go forward. But just to say, if you want a more in-depth breakdown of African spirituality from the perspective of Shakara and the African Center scholars and teachers that have educated me, then feel free to check out that series. It's in 4 parts, once again, in the playlist of this channel. So honoring, yeah, my foundations, and I want to first of all give honor, yeah, to my aunt, who is now an ancestor and was a member or is a member of the Al-Kebla Revivalist movement, Sister Nkechi Ode. And I like when it comes to my KIMOYO presentations, I've come to honor her at the beginning of those presentations. She passed away in 2020, yeah, a couple years ago. But she's always encouraged me, yeah, in relation to ministering on matters of spirituality. And so you know, I just wanted to honor her and appreciate her encouragement, yeah, you know, in light of this particular kind of work. All right. And having said that, and honoring Sister Kechi, who's an ancestor, I also want to honor my organization, the organization that I was born and raised in, yeah, the Al-Kebula Revivalist Movement, which is a Black nationalist Pan-Africanist, yeah, African spiritualist organization, yeah, that is built upon an authentic African-centered spiritual and cultural philosophy, which is referred to as Al-Kebulan Liberty. Yes, and we also adhere to the political philosophies of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and the eminent prophet and king Omowale Malcolm X. Yeah, so I hope ones and ones are appreciating that, because I'm not I'm not, you know, I'm not dwelling, yeah, on that right about now, but I want you to appreciate where I'm coming from, what my foundation is. So when I minister as a student, yeah, of African spiritual and political philosophy, I come here, I drop from sky, as them say. Yeah, I come here by myself. I have a foundation, and my foundation is being involved in the organizational work, yeah, of African liberation within the context of Pan-Africanist organization. All right, so we want to make that very, very clear. The spiritual leader of the Al-Kebula Revivalist movement and my father is a man by the name of Brother Leader Mbandaka, who is my principal teacher when it comes to all matters to do with African liberation. Much of what I know, I've learned from him, and anything that I didn't learn directly from him, I've learned indirectly from him because of the environments and the training that he gave me. All right, so we want to honor Brother Leader Mbandaka, and in doing so, yeah, we want to begin with a quote, yeah, from Mosiah, yeah, the prophet, all right, because I believe that it gives us some instruction in terms of the direction for a presentation such as this, yeah. So in Message to the People, the book is entitled Message to the People, and it contains the work of what Papa Garvey called the course or the school of African philosophy, the course or the school of African philosophy. All right, and this was a course that Papa Garvey initiated in 1937, and it ran to his passing in 1940. In which he was training, yeah, the next cadre of leadership that was going to take over the organization and lead it, yeah. You know what I'm saying, the next generation after him and those who were leading at that time. Okay, and so in the Al-Kebula Revivalist movement, we often refer to this as the final testament, yeah, the final testament, yeah, because in many ways this is the final words, yeah, that Papa Garvey was able to you know, to deliver before his passing. And he says it is necessary for the Negro, the African, to pay close attention to developing the appreciation for institutional life. It is incumbent upon him that he also have and control his own institutions based upon his own cultural and civilized idealisms. All right. So we have highlighted here, have and control his own institutions based upon his own cultural and civilized idealism. Okay. All right. So the question then, essential question for us in the context of this particular presentation is, what is our own cultural and civilized idealism as African people? And where do we go to find our own cultural and civilized idealism? This is important, as Baba John Henry Clark said, that a people rise and fall within the context of institutions. Yeah, our empowerment as a people is reliant upon the strengths of the institutions that we build, and the institutions that we build are directed by a philosophy, directed by an ideology, or what Papa Garvey calls a cultural and civilized idealism. So as African people, yes, having been taken through what we refer to as the Ma'afa, we're beginning with the invasion of our land and our institutions, and then the enslavement of our people, the kidnapping and then the enslavement of our people, the colonization of our lands, and then the neo-colonization of our nations, which is continues to this day. Yeah, through that process, a great deal was done to attack, yes, and sever our tie from an understanding of what it means to be African, yeah, culturally and in terms of civilized idealism. So we have to find ways of piecing that back together, putting that together. Where do we go to find our cultural and civilized idealisms? And when we go to those places, what will we find? Yeah, that is the essential question. And so as we go forward, we're going to look here at the extent to which we can discover, rediscover, and reinvigorate, yeah, this cultural and civilized idealism, yeah, through a study of what we call African spirituality. But before we delve into it, we have to define African spirituality, and that's what we're going to do first and foremost. And we're going to begin, yes, with a word from my spiritual mother, yeah, my spiritual mother, Mama Marimba Ani. And what she's going to do first of all is explain why it is necessary, yes, to define and give expression to definition of African spirituality. Why is it necessary for us to do so? Take the scene.
African spiritual thought in its own terms. Okay, many of us are practicing other religions because we need something. That's a human need. That's an African need. And we're doing this because no one has ever presented African religion to us in terms of the underlying philosophy that the religion is based on. That is, no coherent statement has been made to us about African religion, and it hasn't been explained in terms of the African worldview. Usually it's explained with reference to somebody else's worldview. So I want to attempt to correct that this evening, and then we can get hopefully into questions.
So as I explained here in at the beginning of the KIMOYO series, and probably every video in the KIMOYO series, what Mama Marimba Ani is emphasizing is the fact that we have to discuss African spirituality within the context of the African worldview. This is important because the majority of us, yeah, especially in the Western world, but not exclusively, because this definitely exists on the African continent as well. The predominance of our perspective on indigenous African spiritual systems has been given to us through the lenses of white colonizers, of Europeans who colonized us, yeah. And because we have received religious education from these European culture, we have often, wittingly or unwittingly, directly and indirectly, analyzed indigenous African spiritual systems using templates, yes, that match the template of Western or European culture. And this often leads to a diminishment, yeah, of, in this instance, indigenous African spiritual systems. And one of the things that I've noticed is that people often look at African spiritual systems and African culture in general from the basis of expressions and not philosophy. In other words, we look at what it looks like without discussing and delving into what it means. We look at what it looks like or how it's expressed without looking into the underlying or the underpinning philosophy at the foundation of the ritual. And so we in that sense, we fetishize the spiritual systems. In fact, sometimes the spiritual systems are referred to as fetish. We look at a ritual and say of an African, for example, bowing to a tree. And then we say, well, the African believes that the tree is God, for example. Yeah. And so when you do that, yeah, and this is done specifically in relation to African spiritual systems, no religion, no other religion, yeah, is discussed almost exclusively in relation to the expressions or the rituals, yeah, through which it is identified. It will be like discussing communion, yeah, in the Christian context, without an understanding of the resurrection, yeah, and the Last Supper, for example, all right, and the philosophy that underpins the character of Jesus Christ, yeah, in that regard, all right. And so we want to do justice to indigenous African spiritual systems in terms of discussing them from their philosophical and ideological foundations. But we go forward, all right.
African spiritual
And
thought.
Mama Marimba in this presentation, by the way, this presentation, and you know what? The reality is I could have spent a significant amount of this presentation just playing like the first part of Mama Marimba's presentation, which is entitled Ancestor Worship, you know, or Ancestor Veneration. All right. So you can find that on YouTube. But she spends a significant amount of the first portion of the presentation discussing what a spiritual philosophy should do, the function that a spiritual philosophy should perform within the lives and the context of a people and a people group. Yeah. And I'm just going to highlight one specific function that she highlights in the presentation for the sake of this presentation.
Another thing that a spiritual philosophy should do, and that is that the goals that it presents should not be separate from our political goals as a people. Now, that may be a very controversial point, but for me, it is absolutely essential. Now, if these goals were separate, then that could cause conflict. That it could lead to conflicting commitments. We're talking, after all, about commitment. We're talking about the deepest kind of commitment that human beings can feel. Okay, so that these two areas I'm saying should be compatible, and I'm saying more, they should be one. And I hope to show you how that can happen.
I hope to show you how that can happen today, kings and queens. All right, so let's get into this thing. Yeah, we're emphasizing the fact that the spiritual philosophy should be one with the political goals of a people. All right, that's the function that spirituality must serve it if it is to be of use and functional to a people. Very important in relation to this particular presentation. So the question then becomes, does African spirituality perform a political function in the lives of African people? Does African spirituality perform a political function that informs a process of liberation for African people, or as Mama Marimba would say, African sovereignty or world African sovereignty? Does African spirituality perform that function? That is the question that we're probing today. I hope ones and one are with I. All right. So we're gonna go forward and begin with the concept of culture. Yeah, bearing in mind that I'm suggesting that what we refer to as African people is a biocultural entity. Yes, that we, as the people who identify as African, are channeling towards our liberation efforts, understanding the context in which we exist right about now, which is subjugation and oppression, or otherwise referred to as the Ma'afa. Mama Marimba Ani, in Praying on the Wisdom of Baba Wade Nobles in the book Urugu, defines culture, says Wade Nobles defines culture as, quote, a process which gives people a general design for living and patterns for interpreting their reality. A process which gives people a general design for living and patterns for interpreting reality. He goes on, its aspects, he says, are ideology, ethos, and worldview. Yeah. Now, for the sake of this presentation, I haven't defined those terminologies. All right. just for the sake of time, yeah, but they are very important. All right, its factors, so its aspects are ideology, ethos, and worldview. Now, oftentimes when we use the term ideology, yes, we are talking about political ideology. Culture provides you with a or a number of political ideologies. Ethos, yeah, the general code of ethics, yeah, that governs a people, and worldview, which really encapsulates those two things, yeah, your view, literally your view of the world, where you stand in the world. All right, and this is all underpinned by the factors of culture as explained by Baba Wade Nobles. And the factors are ontology, cosmology, and axiology. And its manifestations are behavior, values, and attitudes. So the ideology, ethos, worldview, ontology, cosmology, and axiology are manifested in our behavior, or the collective behavior of the people, the collective values of the people, and the collective attitudes of the people. So let's break down some of the definition of some of these terminologies, and we're going to break down the definition for the factors of culture, which are ontology, the branch of metaphysics dealing with the nature of being. Yeah, what is our nature? Who are we, and what is our nature of being? Yeah, a set of concepts and categories in a subject area or domain that shows their properties and the relations between them. A set of concepts and categories in a subject area or domain that shows their properties and relations between them. The question then becomes, how does the African concept of the nature of being inform a political ideology? Yes. Well, the first question is, where do we go, yeah, to discover what an African-centered concept of the nature of being is? And I'm suggesting it's within our spiritual systems. And then we can ask the question, how does that inform our political objectives and our political ideology? Second, cosmology, the science of the origin and development of the universe. Yes, modern cosmology is dominated by the Big Bang Theory, which brings together observational astronomy and particle physics. All right. So, cosmology, the science of the origin and development of the universe. This is how we understand the universe, the cosmos, yeah, as a whole. And then we mix that with ontology, we understand our place within the cosmos. So where do we go to find an African-centered cosmological understanding? And how does that inform a political ideology? This is the question that we're asking this evening, this afternoon, this morning, depending on where you are on planet Earth at this moment in time. All right. Okay. And then finally, axiology, the study of nature, the study of the nature of value and valuation, and the kinds of things that are valuable. All right. So the question then becomes, well, stemming from the ontology and the cosmology of African people, where do we go to find the axiology of African people? And how does that axiology inform a political ideology and political objectives? Okay, so then the overarching question for the purpose of this presentation is, can we, yes, derive from African spiritual systems and the philosophies that underpin them a cosmology, an ontology, a cosmology, and an axiology that informs political ideology and political objectives? I hope ones and ones are with me. Feel free to write your questions in the chat. Hopefully we'll be taking questions and discussion. People want to add to the presentation or disagree with me afterwards, and you can feel free to do so. All right. But in the meantime, feel free to post your questions or comments in the chat. Enough for you like for talk to each other, you know what I'm saying, during the presentation, which is all good as well. Big up everybody that's listening so far. Like out the video, please like out the video, and do remember to share it, yeah, share it far and wide. All right, so delving deeper into culture. Yeah, Mama Francis Quest Wilson, gives us areas of people activity, yeah, education, economics, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, war and counter war. These are all elements that are informed of areas of people activity that are informed by culture. And so when people, yes, operate within these areas of people activity, they do so in the process of reinforcing the culture and evolving the culture. There is a symbiotic relationship between the culture, the primary foundational principles of the culture manifested in the areas of people activity, and the areas of people activity reinforcing and evolving the primary principles and values of the culture. Okay, we have to understand this. Yeah, one of those there is religion. All right, so we're going to go forward now. Yeah, in relating, understanding the relationship between culture and religion and spirituality, and we are going to go forward and define spirituality now. Yeah, and I'm going to begin with the definition that I was taught growing up in the Al-Kebulan revivalist movement. And we were taught spirituality is a way of life steeped in reverence to the divine creation and divine inner cultivation. Yeah, so spirituality is, first of all, a way of life. A way of life for what purpose? Revering the divine creation. Yeah, reverence. When we hear words like reverence, immediately we understand that the creation, yes, itself is seen as sacred and divine. Okay, and that when we say divine inner cultivation, yes, that the ourselves as human beings, yes, are a part of that creation and therefore a divine manifestation of it. Yes, and as a divine manifestation of it, we have something called agency through which we can cultivate ourselves. All right, cultivate ourselves. Okay, so if we're going to go into that in a second. When we go into the understanding of what it means to be a human being from an African center point of view, this will begin to make much more sense. Except to say right about now that when we talk about divine inner cultivation, we are talking about the development of our consciousness and our character. Yes, so African spiritual systems focus heavily on the cultivation of the consciousness and the character of the human being individually and collectively. I hope one's the ones that are appreciating where I'm going with this so far. All right. We were also taught spirituality is the center and foundation of African culture, the core of African consciousness, and the essence of the African personality. This is designed to give expression to the pervasiveness of spirituality within the context of African culture. Yes, that the African concept of the self, yeah, is informed by a spiritual understanding. The African, what dominates and pervades the African consciousness is that spiritual understanding, and therefore what dominates African expression, yes, is also that spiritual understanding. Expression being likened here to the African personality. Spirituality is the center and foundation of African culture, the core of African consciousness, and the essence of the African personality. Well, somebody out there is asking, well, what is spirit? Yeah, we've got spirituality. Yeah, well, what is spirit? All right, what is spirit? Okay. And oftentimes we get into this because in modern day terminologies, people define spirit as an entity, this or that entity. Yeah. Well, let's go to the wisdom of Mama Sabomfu Some in the book Spirit of Intimacy, and she gives a very basic definition. She says, when indigenous people talk about spirit, they are basically referring to the life force in everything. Spirit is the energy that helps to connect. Yeah, that's all that spirit means. All right, so spirit, yeah, when we're talking from an African center point of view, all right, is not the emphasis is not on the different manifestations of spirit. The emphasis is on the fact of and the essence of the different manifestations of spirit, if that makes sense. Existence itself is considered to be a manifestation of a universal life force, which, because we are using the English language, is referred to as spirit. But when you look at it in the African context, and you look at the words that are often translated as spirit, there are any number of terminologies and concepts associated with those terminologies, yeah, that can be and often are translated as spirit, yeah, and we're going to go into that a little bit later on. But emphasize, and just put this in your mind for now, that when indigenous people talk about spirit, they are basically referring to the life force in everything. Yes, that is what is being emphasized. That is what is being alluded to within an African-centered spiritual conceptuality. Okay, so when we talk about spirituality being a way of life steeped in reverence to the divine creation, this is why, because the creation is seen as a manifestation of a universal life force. And so our lives are steeped in seeking to be in harmony, yes, and with that life force. And in seeking to be in harmony with that life force, we revere that which is animated out of it. All right, I hope ones are understanding where we're going so far once again. Yeah, so coming back to my foundation, which is my father, in a text, yeah, that he has written, but it's yet to be published. So I won't blow up the name just in case there are any changes on that at the before it is published, yeah. But he explains this in relation to now African spirituality. What is African spirituality? So against this backdrop, African spirituality is defined as an African way of life steeped in reverence to a divine creation and divine inner human cultivation, and I'm going to add of African people. Okay, all right. The term African way of life is essential to the above definition of African spirituality because it emphasizes the centrality and divinity of African people, as well as the indispensability of African culture and its traditions in the expression of African spirituality. It therefore emphasizes African people engaged in a way of life that is submerged in praise and veneration of the Supreme Being and in the nurturing of the human soul according to the nature in which the Creator created us as Africans. The practice of African culture and its traditions is crucial because, in the words of the Grand Master Teacher Baba Yusuf Ben Yochanan, substituting the word religion with the word spirituality, religion is the deification of a people's culture. Therefore, the religion empowers the people in whose culture the religion is expressed. Religion is the deification of a people's culture. Therefore, the religion empowers the people within whose culture the religion is expressed. Religion is how a people make themselves sacred. No religion is absent a culture. No religion is not born out of a culture. There are no cultureless religions. Yeah, and this is one of the biggest misconceptions that we have been given by what is called the three major world religions, because they consider themselves and are often projected as universal and therefore transcending culture. Yeah, not a Nagosa. Once you give the religion a language, yeah, and a chosen people, the religion is cultural at its very foundation. It is a part of and born out of a culture. Come, son. You okay? All right, good. Close the door. All right. So this is important, and I'm going to go back to this quote from my father. Yeah. When the computer decides to cooperate. All right. This is important because of the fact, yeah, that as African people, a part of the process of the Ma'afa resulted in our inability to see our Africanness as sacred, our Africanness as divine, yes, we were taught to apply denigration and subjugation to our Africanness rather than elevation, divinity, and sacredness. So when we say African spirituality, we are centering and emphasizing the sacredness of what it means to be African. Yes, we are saying that through the beingness of African, we are in pursuit and manifesting of the best of ourselves. We are restoring dignity and pride to that which was denigrated and demonized. That is what we're doing when we emphasize African spirituality and the African nature of being. So we're sacralizing ourselves. The question is, does the sacralizing of ourselves inform a political ideology and a political objective? Now, remember that question coming at the beginning of the presentation, which related to what Papa Garvey said in terms of developing and building institutions based upon our own culture and civilized idealisms. And we're going to pray on the wisdom of an ancestor by the name of Okot Pitek. Yeah, he's from Uganda. And he, in analyzing, and I'm made to understand that he was not a particularly religious individual. Yes, but he was entirely impassioned by the need for Africans to have a cultural revolution. Okay, and so in understanding and analyzing his own context, yeah, as an African from Uganda, yes, he says to us, the religion of a people is perhaps the most important aspect of their culture. What they believe governs their lives. It provides their worldview, the general direction along which they live their lives and relate to each other and the universe. It guides them in their conduct of war and peace. It is the basis of their behavior towards one another. He says the knowledge of the religions of our people is the key to the knowledge of our culture. Religion is the deification of a people's culture. Baba Okot Pitek says, the knowledge of the religions of our people as African people is the key to the knowledge of our culture. In other words, yeah, in relating it to the question from Papa Garvey, where we would go to discover and find the culture and civilized idealism of African people is in the spiritual philosophy of African people. It is enshrined in our spiritual philosophy. Why? Because spirituality is the center and foundation of African culture, the core of African consciousness, and the essence of the African personality. So many of, or much of, or the best of our ontology, our cosmology, and our axiology is encoded and enshrined in our spiritual philosophy. Then this is only important if we are pursue African liberation. If we want to be liberated as African people, that's what makes this important. If we don't want to be liberated as African people, this is not important. We can find whatever other cultural matrix that we want, yeah, to define our liberation process. But if our emphasis is on being liberated as African people, we cannot do that if we are not tapping into the African personality and the African worldview. Okay, so with that backdrop, yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah, we emphasize this terminology again, KIMOYO, which can mean dynamo vitalism or can mean of the spirit. Yeah, Moyo in many of the so-called Bantu languages means spirit. It means life. It means the light, the all-encompassing life force. It can also mean heart, yeah, and other vital organs of the body. As we go to the work of Baba Kimbwanden the Kiabonseke Fukiao, not for the last time in this presentation, Moyo means vital power. Remember what Mama Sabon Fusome said, yeah? In terms of spirit, when indigenous people speak of spirit, they're talking about the life force and everything. Another word for life force is the vital power. Another term is the animating principle. The vital power, Moyo. So came to earth after Futu, the container of something secret or of great price, yeah, was completely tied up. The container for which life, yeah, was flourished within, yeah. The Futu and its content were ready to secure life to be born on earth. Moyo in this language, Kikongo, is universal what? Matter. So hold on here. Moyo is vital power, but it's also what? Universal matter. It is something both inside and out. Moyo is what is the vitality of life. It is the key word to Kibantu, the Bantu way of life, their philosophy. Kimoyo, vitalism, as in tapping into, revering, harmonizing with, steeped in reverence to the vital power, is their religion, and it is not animism. All right. So we get this expression, yeah, in our ancient Kemetu cosmology, in which we have the being of Ra, yes, and praise poetry that is expressed in the mouth of Ra, yes, which is creator, deity, divinity, principle in ancient Kemet, the Nile Valley. Thus said Ra, Lord, and this translation is taken from the Hosea, yeah, Sacred Wisdom of Ancient Kemet. Thus said Ra, the Lord of all, Lord of the utmost limits, after he had come into being, I am the one who came into being as Keper, he who comes into being and brings into being. When I came into being, being itself came into being. All beings came into being after I came into being. When I came into being, being itself came into being. All beings came into being after I came into being. So we're seeing here, yeah, that Ra is likening himself to beingness. Yes, that all that be is Ra, and Ra is all that be. Because when Ra come into being, everything will be come into being. And we want just give you a different translation. All right. So say Ra, Lord of ups or downs and wrongs, so when him come be. Me are the one we come be keeper. Him we come be and bring come be. When me come be, Phoebe come be, always come be. Always be come be from me when I come be. All right, that's a Patois translation of what Ra just said, and I'm sure that when Ra spoke, yeah, Ra sounded much like what I just said than what I previously said. All right, so say Ra, louder, ups or wrong sound, dong so. Okay, all right. Moving forward. So what do we mean by Keper? That's the question. Yeah, what do we mean by Keper? Yeah, and what I'm doing here is giving an African-centered understanding of what the creator and what beingness is, or what the nature of the creation is. We're just tapping into African cosmology, yes, before we go into ontology and so on and so forth, and see how that relates to political ideology. Yeah, so if you want more, we need to go more into this. Check out the KIMOYO series in the playlist. Yeah, all right. So taken from the wisdom of Baba Teofilo Benga, who is an expert on these matters of African philosophy as it relates to the Nile Valley and ancient Kemet in particular. And this is taken from a book called A Companion to African Philosophy. And in it, Baba Teofilo Benga has a essay entitled Egypt, Ancient History of African Philosophy. And so in it, he defines the term Keper. Yeah. He says, we must then devote special attention to this verb, Keper, not only because it occurs frequently in the Egyptian text, but also because the grammatical points discussed above are concentrated in this verb. The verb Keper expresses being or existence. So many of the time that you see being in the translation, you will find that the term Keper or variations of the term Keper, yes, in the actual original text. All right. The verb keper expresses being or existence in all possibilities. It thus means both becoming and effecting. So Ra comes to being as keper, means that Ra comes to being as existence and all the possibilities of existence. That's what that means. Yes. It thus means both becoming and effecting. Included also in the meaning of the verb are the ideas of cause and effect. It is in this sense that the verb that the creator says to himself, I exist, and in me all possibilities become existence. Yeah. Keperu. Yeah. All right. So keperu. The existence exists because of the existence of the creator. So the existence keperu of the creator manifests keper itself as becoming and effecting. All right. So in essence, the creator is the creation and the creation is the creator. And in fact, there isn't just a creation, there is a creating. Yes, because the creating is a perpetual process of possibilities coming into manifestation. This is African cosmology from the Nile Valley point of view. But what's that got to do with politics, Shakara, and black liberation? Don't worry, we soon come. All right. We must devote. Sorry. Let's move on. There is no genesis, but cogenesis in the sense that the existent exists by simple fact of its inner nature, coming into being by itself. Kepler, oh, I'm not going to read the imaginator transliteration. The existent brings out at the same time the entirety of existence. The one and the many are interlaced by the same dynamic power of the existent. One implication of this is that what matter and spirit are two aspects of the same reality. This is African cosmology. Yes, what we call matter and what we call spirit are two aspects of the same reality. You will get this when you study Baba Kimwan and the Kiabon Sekifuki Yao dealing with Kikongo and Bantu cosmology when he's speaking about the concept of Kalunga. Yes, welded opposites inseparably together. All right. Matter and spirit are two aspects of the same reality. Try to do with matter without spirit, and what you have is incomplete, because matter and spirit do not just lie side by side. They are inextricably connected together. In other words, the material realm and that which underpins it, yeah, the universal force that underpins it, are not separate and distinct. Yeah, it's not this or that. The manifestation cannot exist without the underpinning, and the underpinning cannot exist without the manifestation. This is African cosmology. So the African sees the universe as a complete whole and the human being as a part of that complete whole, and seeks to be in reverence and harmony with that complete whole by tapping into or conceptualizing the essence of all that is. Yes? Conceptualizing the essence of all that is. Okay. We got Brother Talawa, yeah. It was a Mekias, bring the politics come. So as a result of that, I'm gonna skip these two slides, yeah. I'm also gonna skip this one. I'm gonna deal with this one, all right, because it's important. All right. So Anansi. Why is Anansi important? Anansi is important because Anansi is probably the most, or arguably the most prominent of our cultural retentions in terms of an individual character, yes, that was brought from the continent of Mama Africa to the Americas, yeah. And this is an Adinkra symbol, Anansi and Tonta, which is a symbol of wisdom, creativity, and the complexities of life. Yeah, we've got the Adinkra symbol, which is encapsulates the spiritual philosophy of the Akan, which symbolizes wisdom, creativity, and the complexities of life. Yeah, this is important because I'll give you a story from what my father told me. He said that one of the reasons why Anansi was so preserved, yeah, is that Anansi was a spider who was also known as a trickster and was able to outsmart and outwit animals in the stories of Anansi that were considered to be stronger or greater than himself. And so for Africans who were facing enemies that were perceived to be stronger than who we were, the preservation of Anansi stories preserved a lot of our spiritual philosophy, a lot of our wisdom philosophy that was enabled us to teach our children, pass on to our children life lessons to deal with the realities that we were being faced with through the plantation life and economy of enslavement. All right, but when you look at it deeper within the Akan cosmology, what is Anansi? Anansi, yes, is the keeper of wisdom, the keeper of stories. But Anansi is also the organizer through that wisdom of the universe, the agent, through which Nyame or Nyankopong brings order into the universe through that wisdom. And the web, the spider's web, is considered to be, the strings in the spider's web is considered to be symbolic of the order, yes, and the connectivity of the universe. Yeah. Okay. We have a similar concept in the Kikongo, cosmology, and Baba Kim Wanden the Kiabonseki Fukiya breaks it down like this. He says, every human being, we're getting to the politics of it now, so bear in mind what I just said about what the web symbolizes and the spider Anansi symbolizes within the Akan cosmology, both on the human material level and on the level of the cosmos, what that symbolizes within African spiritual consciousness. All right, and then we're going to relate this now to another concept called Lukosi within the Bakongo or Bantu philosophy. It says every human being, say the Bantu, has a kinzungidila of his own within the social and physical Kinzungidila of the community. This Kinzungidila, literally the surrounding circle or square. That's what Kinzungidila means. The surrounding circle or square. In other words, the environment is physical, social, and what? Political. Yes, it is the child's world in which he has to learn while growing. Being born is to enter one's Kinzungidila, as one can see in the figure below. And by the figure below, he's talking about the webs, that were illustrated in the previous slides. All right, I'm moving quickly for the sake of time. To control one's square, Kinzungidila, from within requires a total knowledge of the whole, Kinzungidila, which means creating physical, mystical, spiritual, and even telepathic means of communication throughout all its corners. These mini rays become one's power force, not only of communication, but also of control within and outside as well. These means constitute his miakese, antennae. Once his main Nzambo bridges, which are the diagonal lines, installed across his square world, with his Unkudulu, natural growth, the art of making one's Kikulu history, man makes his own environment, Lukosi Lua Nzingu, a net of survival or a web of survival. Yeah. Now there's a lot of concepts in here, right? Just follow, closely. It will all come to be explained properly soon. All right. This Lukosi net or web helps him to make his life possible in his environment, no matter how hostile or poor that environment may be. This Lukosi, in other words, signifies ensemble of knowledge and techniques required in order to control a given environment and be able to survive its conditions socially, politically, and economically. So anyway, the Lukosi Lua Zingu web of life became at once his net, his pitfall, lobilla, and his ndombo or daki hook, which help him to catch his prey, build his shelter, save his food, fight against his enemies, control his fertility, and more. Thanks to this web of life, he can move and communicate within and outside of his Kinzungidilla, the world square. Okay, a lot there. Let me explain some things. Because African spirituality, yes, is an African way of life steeped in reverence to the divine creation and divine inner human cultivation, how we conceptualize the cosmology, yes, and in revering the cosmology, how we conceptualize it, we seek to replicate the order of the cosmos in terms of our community and our human development. So we see that Anansi, yes, orders the universe through and connects the various different elements and dimensions of the universe through the conception of a web. And so each human being in the Bantu or the Kikongo cosmology has her own web through which to understand their own environment. This is just the concept now. Yeah, we're dealing with the conceptual and the symbolic and what that means. All right. And so through different elements here that are connected to this web, you are taught to manage your environment. Yes. You are taught to manage the pitfalls and the challenges of life. Okay. Bantu concept of the Kosi, the net web of life as one can meet it among the Congo, is their technological symbolic source of answers to man's political, educational, economic, and technological needs. One who has this concept clearly must have the power to respond to his needs if he is really to master his Kinzungidilla. As a matter of fact, one can find that most of the earliest Bantu tools, objects of art and crafts, net baskets, liana bridges, house farming roof, and rupestral drawings reflect this pattern of Lukosi Luazingu, the web of survival life, based not only on their technological concept, but on their world view as well. Okay, so we're seeing here that the idea of political philosophy is encapsulated in the spiritual cosmology of the people and translated from one generation to the next through that cosmology and through that philosophy. I hope ones and ones are seeing the link between the political and the spiritual in terms of the concept of Lukosi and Kinzungidilla in this particular example. All right. So one of the aspects, of the Lukosi that Baba Kimbwanden Lekiabon Sekifukia breaks down is this idea of the genetic rope, the connection to the ancestors. All right, the connection to the ancestors and understanding one's place within one's community and whatever one considers to be one's community. Yes, and this is why ancestorship is extremely important, because what it represents is the connectivity and the continuity of the community. And so to explain that further in relation to an African liberation agenda, we are going to pray on the wisdom of Baba Sheikh Anta Diop in the book Civilization of Barbarism. He says, we have said earlier that a people without a historical conscience is a population. Your historical conscience is provided for you by your connection to your ancestors. There is no other way to preserve and perpetuate a historical conscience than through a connection to your ancestors. The loss of national sovereignty and of historical conscience following a prolonged foreign occupation engenders stagnation and even sometimes regression, disintegration, and even a partial return to barbarism. So we're being told that our spiritual systems are regressive and so on and so forth. When in actual fact, one of the things that our spiritual traditions do, our spiritual systems do, is maintain our connection to our ancestors, and therefore they maintain our historical conscience. And it is the loss of that that has led to our stagnation and our regression. Not the affirmation of, but the loss of our indigenous spiritual systems, history, and culture. But then, what would we call an African history? We need to distinguish two levels. The immediate one of the local history, so dear, deeply lived, in which the African people, segmented by diverse exterior forces, the principle of which is colonialism, are shriveled up, find themselves trapped, and are vegetating today. A second level, more general, further off in time and space, and including the totality of our people, comprises the general history of Black Africa, insofar as research permits, restoring it from a purely scientific approach. Each history is thus pinpointed and correctly situated in relation to a general historical coordinates. Thus, all the continent's history is re-evaluated according to a new unitary standard and suited to revive and to cement on the basis of established fact all the inner elements of the historical mosaic. Okay. In short, what is being said here is that through the study of our ancestors, yes, we are able to not just retrace and restore the historical conscience of our individual group of African people, but a proper study of our groups as African people will also be able to reconnect the historical web or mosaic to all of the different groups of African people and connect them to each other. In the book, two books by Baba Sheikh Anta Diop, he goes into this even deeper. The first is the cultural unity of Black Africa. The second is Black Africa, the economic and the cultural foundation for a federated state. Yeah. Stick a pin here, because we're going to come back to more specifically how Baba Sheikh Anta Diop considers African spirituality to be a great tool in restoring the broader African cultural and historical conscience. So on one element of this, yeah, we have great examples of this as Africans who live in the diaspora, because we are not just Igbo, we are not just Yoruba, we are not just Umbundu, we are not just Bakongo, we are not just Zulu, we are not just Ndebele, yeah, we are not just Fon, we are not just Mande, Mandinka, yeah, we are not just Temne, we are not just Ewe, we are all of the above and more. And so when we look at the Ma'afa experience of our people, we can see the historical conscience, the macro historical conscience being restored through the social organizations of the people in resistance to enslavement. Yes, during that process. And one of the examples, I'm going to give you a few examples. One of the examples is that of Palmares, as it says here, in Brazil, a liberated state of free Africans, yeah, lasted from approximately 1595 to 1695, about 100 years. In Palmares, yes, a state, a nation that was built in the midst of enslavement, the size, yes, all right, of about a third of Portugal, Africans built a unified Pan-African nation. But at the center and the foundation of that Pan-African nation, because you had Africans from different groups of African people, what united them was their culture and their spirituality. When you study the character of Zumbi and Ganga Zumba, they were political leaders, but they were also spiritual leaders, and they were able to unite the various different groups of African people because of the fact of the African worldview, because of the application of the sense of oneness within how Africans viewed ourselves cosmologically, yes, and ontologically. Can I prove that? 100%. Using another example taken from the book, Taki's Revolt, the story of the Atlantic Slave War by Vincent Brown. Taki's War, is the Taki's Revolt, sorry, is the name of the book. Forgive the mistake in the actual text. Using the example of Obia. All right, we're going to use the example of Obia in Jamaica to give expression to how the role that the African spiritual systems that became known as Obia, what they produced in terms of the revolutions that were taking place among African people. This is important because Obia is often characterized, again, as I was saying at the beginning, not in terms of philosophy, but in terms of expression. What Obia is a verb. It means, it's supposed to mean that you do something bad to somebody else. You're Obia smaddy. That's what we are taught that it's supposed to mean. However, that's not the extent to which and how Africans used it, within the context of pursuing political objectives during enslavement. Planters received news of a foiled conspiracy in Antigua, that should say. In 1736, Cromantes, led by a man named Court, also referred to by the Ga royal title of Taki, formed, and by the way, that Taki is different from the Taki in Jamaica now, like Taki is a name. There's plenty of Taki about the place, all right? Formed a plot with a Creole master carpenter named Tomboy, who helped to recruit other Creole craftsmen and drivers into their plan to assassinate the governor and the most prominent planters, and then seize the island, accompanied by military officers and lieutenants referred to as brafos, following the Gold Coast practice, as well as by Obia doctors who administered binding oaths, loyalty oaths. Court staged an elaborate coronation ceremony to announce his authority, but traitors betrayed the conspiracy, and the slaveholders reacted with brutal vengeance fueled by panic. So emphasis here, because Taki or Court, was a political and spiritual leader, what he was able to do was ceremonialize and bind the people them together, through loyalty oaths. And when you look at anti-slavery rebellions, this is one of the most common features that you're going to find, that the fighting masses are bound together or conduct oaths among themselves in order to solidify ties, to solidify the underpinning philosophy and ideals of the revolution and their relationship to each other. But these oaths are informed and expressed through the spiritual systems of the people. But not only are they formed and expressed through the spiritual systems of the people, the philosophy for the rebellion comes from the spiritual philosophy of the people. Given the preponderance of revolts led by enslaved, and I'm going to go, there's a number of quotations from this book I'm going to cite, for the sake of just emphasizing this point. Given the predominance of revolts led by enslaved Cromantes, a term for Africans that came from West Africa, in Jamaica and beyond, many observers have focused on their backgrounds, ethnic origins, collective ideologies, and cultural orientations and practices to describe and explain the insurrections. Ethnic origins, collective ideologies, and cultural orientations and practices to describe and explain the insurrections. The Cromantes have been described as essentially African in character and style, aiming for the recreation of Akan-style autocracy. So oftentimes it is suggested that the aim of Taki's rebellion was to overthrow the enslaver and institute an African-centered system of government on the island of Jamaica, all right? Or the resurrection of a culturally distinct ethnic group. Such descriptions capture the extent to which Cromanti revolts shared common features. Cromanti revolts shared common features. So in all these different places, The revolts of African people share common features based upon the fact that we had a shared culture. Conspirators and rebels often communicated their plans in the Cromanti language and employed common cultural symbols and signs. They turned to Obeah practitioners to administer loyalty oaths and offer spiritual consultation. They organized into companies with military captains. In battle and defeat, they showed a similar fortitude, often preferring suicide to capture and facing execution with stoicism that impressed their enemies. So we see here, we're emphasizing the fact that when we talk about the role of the priest in African spiritual systems, the priest has a social community role. Often the role of the priest is diminished to fetishism. Yeah, give the people them some amulet, yeah, that they believe is going to protect them, yes, from harm. That's how it's often characterized. But the reality, the spiritual leader, yes, had a social role for organizing the community. The role is informed, his political role is informed by the spiritual traditions encapsulated in the culture of the people. Let's go forward. Transformations on the Gold Coast had taught Africans in that region to find ways of uniting competing factions to achieve common interests and to impose the depredations of common foes, whether Akwamu, Asante, or empires of Europe. These coalition building strategies relied in the Americas as they had in Africa on collective promises consecrated by oaths which secured the bonds of political alliance for immediate purposes. One might see these oaths as an indication of ethnic similarity among people who share cultural understanding of the material and supernatural enforcement of sanctions. At the same time, however, the oaths were crucial for forging bonds of alliance precisely because the coalitions were so fragile. Any ethnic affinity was an insufficient basis for military order. Thus, where the British had their articles of war, a code of law read out as an incantation, the Cromantis had their solemn oaths. Now, this is very important. There's a few things in this particular slide that need to be explained. The first is that Africans had various different civil disputes. Yes. Not all encompassing, not everybody, but civil disputes had existed, especially at this time, among Africans on the continent. We never had time for that in the Americas, in the diaspora. Yeah. So what is being explained here is that in order to withstand and organize for rebellion, you had to be able to unite different groups of African people. Yes, sometimes who had conflicts among each other. The key people or the key role, the key functionary that was able to be successful in forming these bonds of political alliance was the Obeah man. Yes, was the Obeah man. Why was the Obeah man able to unite various different, sometimes conflicting groups of people? Because there was a similarity within the worldview that was informed by the spiritual systems of these various different groups of people. So as was said, the equivalent of a code of law as written out by the Europeans, yes, the Cromanti had their solemn oath. So the solemn oath was not just a statement of loyalty, but it was a statement of ideology towards achieving a particular goal. This is the same, yes, as what was done in various different Maroon communities. Yeah. So I'm explaining all of this because think now Palmares, Think now the various different maroon communities across the Americas. Yeah, they were able to sustain themselves by bringing together different groups of people and developing ways, yeah, of securing loyalty through the worldview of African cultural affirmation, which is enshrined and given expression in our spiritual traditions. I'm disappointing some people at the moment because I'm not talking about voodoo dolls and sacrifices. I'm talking about philosophy and ideology. We don't seem to consider the fact that African spiritual systems have philosophy and ideology. Yeah? I'm going to skip these slides for the sake of time. But I really could go into them. I'm going to skip them for the sake of time. But as you can see here, the highlights, yeah. Insurgents could be unified by beliefs in the spiritual wisdom of ritual specialists, yeah. Spiritual counselors were crucial to rebel politics, yeah. Why were spiritual counselors crucial to rebel politics? I'm going to read this one. This one's important. Right? I'm going to read this one. This one's important. If military necessity governed maroon camps, collaboration within and across maroon groups required the kinds of coalition building strategies that had worked in West Africa. Bearing in mind that this didn't start in the Americas, it started on the continent. Yeah, these coalition building strategies. Even though Cremantes were probably in the majority, rebel encampment communities were was as polyglot as the plantations. Kodjo, it was said, established English as an official language of communication to prevent misunderstandings and quarrels that could arise given the diversity of origins. At the same point, too, the Maroons adopted the Cromanti language, derived from several Gold Coast tongues, as a unifying idiom. Under the pressure of perpetual warfare, mistrust ran high, and runaways who made it to maroon encampments often served periods of probation before they earned the mountain people's trust. The maroon procedures for incorporation relied heavily on Cromanti religion, which ritualized the union of people from multiple lines of descent through oath-taking ceremonies and the spiritual council of Obia practitioners. Knight, as a colonizer, learned from a correspondent in the Westmoreland parish that the Leeward Maroons often consulted a person who they called Obia man, whom they greatly revered. His words carried the force of an oracle with them. More famously, the Windward Maroons turned to their priestess, Nanny, after whom they named their principal settlement above Stony River, that's Nannytown, and who remains a revered ancestor. These figures brought spiritual and social cohesion to people under extreme duress. And in West Africa, they performed the sacred services that bound different factions into a military alliance. So there's been a lot of questioning about what role African spiritual systems played, yeah, and where were the African divinities, all right? This is where they were. The African divinities were binding the people into political and military alliance. Yes? That's what them did there. And that's what they know. Yeah? That is what was going on. Okay? All right. You know what? I could extemporize, but we're not going at that any further. I think that really explains that particular aspect of things. All right. So I could have done this the other way around, yeah? But we're going to go into the self now and explain how this relates to the politics, yeah? So in relation to the Muntu, yeah, which is a human being, the word for human being in many Bantu languages, all right? Again, taken from Baba Kimwa then the Kibo Sekifukia's book, Self-Healing Power and Therapy. In my previous work, I tried to explain about the muntu that we all are. This concept is diametrically opposed to that found in the mechanically oriented world. In a mechanically oriented world, a human being is conceived merely as a mechanical tool with decreasing value. African society in general, and the Bantu in particular, perceive a human as a power phenomenon of perpetual veneration from conception to death. Yeah, a perpetual reality that cannot be denied, and more so after death, because this physical reality becomes a spiritual living reality in words, deeds, experience, image, and indivisible radiating sun. As such, a pregnant woman is perceived as the carrier of a new and holy package, full of power and energy, a continuation genetically of old radiations under a new form. The entire community awaits the coming of the package, the infant, or the muntu, to be born. Bear this in mind. Yeah, it's gonna make sense in a second, all right? And just remember what Ra, yeah, as represented by the sun, yeah, comes into being, and all beingness comes into being as Ra comes into being. The human being is conceived of as a sun. Yes, a being of phenomenal power, worthy of veneration from conception to death. The death of a human being is perceived as the setting of a living sun into the lower world, the Kumpemba, the spiritual world, or the world of the ancestors, the community of the dead. The Bantu concept of the human being's influence upon the environment, society, and his fellow human beings is very clear. Nothing is isolated in the universe. Nothing is isolated in the universe. Nothing is isolated in the universe. Spirit is the what? Nothing is isolated in the universe. Spirit is the vital force of the universe. Nothing is isolated in the universe. The Bantu concept of the human being's influence upon the environment, society, and his fellow human beings is very clear. Nothing is isolated in the universe. Visible or invisible, the sun always shines and we feel its warmth. Likewise, human beings, living or dead, as living suns rising and setting around the world, are all related to each other. The warmth of radiations never die at sunset, the physical death. And I love Baba Kimbo and then the Kiabo Sakifukia, because him always adding some Kikongo for us to get our tongues around. He says, Lusala Iwanuni Yandi Wampana Lo. Birds have feathers because they were passed on by other birds genetically through birth, says the Congo proverb. Birds fly because they continue to perform their ancestors' art of flying. Yeah. Where do we get that? Birds fly because they continue to perform their ancestors' art of flying well. The muntu, to the living sun, must know well who he is. Yes. What the content of his package of health is, and the pillar of his individual self-healing power, so that he might pass on the same package in his return. I'm nearly finished, kings and queens, and I'm going to send out the link for anybody who wants to come on, add to the knowledge, challenge me, or ask questions. All right, I'm going somewhere with this particular idea. Now we're going to go from Central Africa, which is where we are right about now, and see how this concept was preserved into a nation building effort in the Caribbean. Yeah, I want to know for us all on. All right, it's gonna become conclusive in a second. It is here that the misconstruction of the myth of the ancestor cult of Africa began in the Western literacy of Africa. African people do not worship the dead. They venerate Nsinga, Dikanda. Oh, there's a typo here. The community's genetically bounding rope power, strengthened between the dead and the living. This renders perfectly alive the biogenetic history of the community. The dead represent a physical and spiritual reality, present in the past, as well as living in the community today, in the process of shaping the direction of our physical and spiritual, and I'm going to add political reality and presence in the future. All right, just bear all this in mind. I'm not explaining anything at this stage because it will soon make sense. Yeah. So one of the sayings that we get that is said in Zulu, because again these terminologies are found in various different languages, but in Zulu the phrase is muntu ungumuntu ngabantu. Yeah, a person is a person because there are people. In other words, I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. This is not just a cute saying. This saying is on the one hand informs our ontology, which is our understanding of our nature of being. A person is a person because there are people. But when you look into the word muntu, untu, yes, that suffix untu is the terminology for the vital life force, the animating principle within many Bantu languages. And so the human being, muntu, people, Bantu, are considered to be simply an expression of that vital force. Yes, the human being is conceived as a manifestation of that vital force. When me come be, Fibi come be. As Ra said earlier on. Yes? Or all things came into being when I came into being. Ntu is a short way of saying that. Muntu is a short way of saying that. I'm going to skip this slide, but this is a good book here that really goes into more detail in terms of how African spiritual cultural philosophy informs African political institutions, traditionally speaking. All right. But I want to get to from Central Africa and South Africa with Muntu to how that understanding was enshrined in the Caribbean. Yeah. And you know what? I'm going to come back to this slide in the discussion. All right. So remind me to come back to Sheikh Anta Diop in the discussion. Right? We're not going to do that right about now. So remember everything I've just said about Muntu, the rising sun and the setting sun and so on and so forth. Yeah. I know it's a long train of thought, but please follow me. Yeah. So ritual, which is what most people tend to focus on when we're discussing African spiritual systems. We focus on ritual, tending not to focus on the underpinning philosophy and the symbolism behind the ritual. All right, let's go in. Mama Marimba Ani again says African life is replete with ritual. It states interrelationship with other beings in the universe. Spirituality from an African point of view, yeah, is a way of life steeped in reverence, yes, to the divine creation and divine intercultivation. So the rituals are symbolic of our interrelationship with other beings in the universe. Ritual sacrifice symbolizes the principle of interdependence and reciprocity. It is through ritual that the unexplained is understood, that chaos is made to be ordered within the logic of tradition. It is through ritual that trauma is avoided, crisis dealt with and overcome, and difficult transitions are perceived as passages between stages of normal growth and development. Universally, in ritual, the African combines life with artistic expression. Ritual is, in a sense, the ultimate philosophical expression of the African worldview, for it is the modality within which the unity of the human and the divine is expressed, in which the unity of spirit and matter is perceived, and in which the eternal moment is achieved. We can see ourselves in all dimensions of time through our rituals, through our connection to those who have come and gone and those who are yet to come. All right, I hope ones are following me. Now I'm gonna place a snippet of my father talking about ritual in terms of the synchronicity of African consciousness, and then we're gonna go to Jamaica and look at how the Kikonga philosophy, yeah, that was elucidated earlier, was preserved in Jamaica in a nation building effort.
But when we engage in our African rituals restore the naturalness and the divinity of African being. Are you all with me, brothers and sisters? It is very empowering. It's very empowering. And by nature, by order of being, it's simply, brothers and sisters, exorcises the European spirit, if we can call it that, the European demon in us. It exorcises that. We are here to honor the life and legacy of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And every year we, within the Al-Qaeda Revivalist movement, call the community together to have this opening ceremony of Thanksgiving, to bring us together as an African communal family, to bring us together as an African nation. See, we must understand every nation does this. Every nation does. What this does, it feeds the national consciousness. It shapes and feeds and directs the national consciousness of a people. So we call the community together. We come together as a communal family, but we also come together as a nation. And understand, a nation is a people organized as a sovereign entity. A sovereign entity, meaning a sovereign entity is an entity that's empowered by its own agency. It's an empowered entity. And that's what we're striving to rebuild. That's the principle that underpins coming together for this Mosiah opening ceremony. But we also designed this ceremony to synchronize our consciousness, synchronize our thoughts as a community and as a nation. Because that's what culture does. It synchronizes the thought process and thought patterns of a people. In their rituals, in their ceremonies, they reiterate and reinforce certain values. And in so doing, they create, and as I said before, reinforce a national consciousness. That's what we're trying to do here, because we realize that national consciousness with culture at its center is the vital prerequisite for nation building.
National consciousness is the vital prerequisite for nation building. So how do we reinforce the primary principles and values that will inform that national consciousness and inform, therefore, our quest for nation building or African sovereignty in that regard? Let's use a living example. Yeah. This is taken from a paper by the name of Kumina, A Spiritual Vocabulary of Nationhood in Victorian Jamaica. Yes, by a sister by the name of Diane M. Stewart. She says, an ironic juxtaposition existed between the British Empire's politics of sovereignty and that of the Kumina nation. Listen carefully. Yeah, now the Kumina is a spiritual tradition that was preserved by ancestors, Kikonga ancestors primarily, that came to Jamaica. And as you can see, they're referred to as the Kumina Nation or the Congo Nation or the Bongo Nation. All these terminologies are used, yeah, in Jamaica by the Kumina Nation and so on, and by others referring to the Kumina Nation. Yeah. So continuing, while the ever expanding Victorian British Empire sought to absorb African nations into its colonial polities under various arrangements in the late 19th century, Central Africans in Jamaica and other African exiles in the Caribbean and the Americas did not abandon their own nation politics. They engaged in nation-building practices that held currency for them as enslaved and colonial subjects, discovering their potential as self-govern, even while toiling under British imperial governance. These nation practices included holding native judiciary courts, hosting coronation pageants, and assuming royal titles. Certainly, Queen Victoria died without ever knowing the names and the power of the late 19th century commoner queens. These women, their names now lost, were predecessors of figures like Queenie Espote, who reigned in the mid-20th century over the Central African Jamaican linguistically related nations of Moyenge, Machunde, Congo, Modongo, and Mumbaka. In 1946, like far too many of her overworked and under-rewarded compatriots, 47-year-old Queenie Espote prematurely crossed the Kalunga, the watery boundary dividing the worlds of the living and the dead in Kikongo cosmology. Whether conceived as the Atlantic Ocean or other bodies of water, Kalunga in Kumina culture signifies the point of entry to the Mpemba, which was referred to earlier. Remember the setting sun, the Kumpemba, the lower world of invisible powers, ancestors and deities, and immediately glosses the concepts of immensity and immeasurability. Taking her first breath in 1899, just months before Queen Victoria's last, in 1901, Queenie Espote defies death time and time again, returning to Kumina ceremonies in St. Thomas to dance live circular paths with her descendants. I know everybody didn't understand all of that, but we're going to make it clear in a second. The picture that you see is of Queenie Imogen, yeah, which is another Kumina queen. So the point here is that one of the ways in which Africans preserved their resistance and their nationhood was through the preservation of our spiritual systems and the connection to the ancestors. So that when you see the terms Moyenge, Machunde, Congo, Modongo, Mumbaka, these are names of ancestors of the Kumina nation. And their different clans are given the names of their ancestors, and their historical conscience is sustained and maintained through the ritualizing of the names, yes, of these ancestors. This is a nationhood concept. This isn't just through some gubados. Yeah? You know, this isn't voodoo dolls. Yeah, the reverence for ancestors has a political application. And so that reverence for ancestors and that historical conscience is ritualized within the community. How is it ritualized? So here we have the Dikenga. Yes, the Congo Dikenga. All right, cosmogram of the Congo people. And as you can see, you see the Kumpemba, the lower world, yeah, or the unseen, the invisible world, the Kunseke, which is the material world, and different stages, yeah, of life, yeah. The Kala, the Tukala, the Luvemba, and the Musoni, pictured, yeah, depicted here in this cosmogram. All right. Then we go forward now, and this is an example, a reenactment of a Kumina ritual as done by the Jamaican folk singers, yeah. And so the primary Kumina ritual, what oftentimes people refer to Kumina just by the primary ritual that is associated with it. All right. And so this is a primary Kumina ritual. And as you can see, I'm going to talk over this. In fact, let me not talk over it. Let me just play it for a second. All right, kings and queens, yeah. So that's just and come on, I can get more animated than that. All right, but what we see there, yeah, is a reenactment of this particular concept right here. This the Kenga right here. You see two drummers in the middle representing the Kalunga, which is the portal between the Kunseke and the Kumpemba, and the dancers, yeah, circumambulate the drummers, and so they're going through the process of birth and rebirth, yes, consistently, but in each of their turns, yeah, they rotate on their own axis and around the conceptual Kalunga, which is manifested or a given expression by the drummers at that point. But these rituals are designed to transmit and translate the historical conscience of the people, without which their nationhood is impossible to the younger generation, and reinforce the principles and the values associated with their nationhood through the ritual. It's reinforcing their cosmology in the ritual. It's reinforcing their ontology in the ritual. And when the time is correct, it reinforces their rebellion against the state, which it did when Paul Bogle rose up, yeah, in 1865 in Jamaica. Kings and queens, St. Thomas, we say. All right. So, to wrap up, one of the ways in which Africans, let's look at the ways in which Africans, yeah, who have a significant sense of self and are actually pursuing African liberation, yes, have developed on these concepts, yeah, on this spiritual understanding, and developed rituals that reinforce our sovereignty in today's world. One of the main ones is through the Abakasem Sumsum, yeah, which is a ritual that Mama Marimba Ani has developed. I've actually had the pleasure of attending Abakasem Sumsum. It takes place annually, and next year is actually the 20th anniversary of Abakasem Sumsum, and so I'm hoping to be in ATL, yeah, for that. So anybody within the United States of America in the month of May, yeah, 2023, yeah, man, all roads lead to Atlanta. All right, you know what I'm saying? Because we got, yeah, man, evoke some ancestor that day there. All right. Abakasem Sumsum is a spiritual political process from praise song to African spiritual warfare onto world African sovereignty. It's the words of Mama Marimba Anli. She said the purpose of Abakasem Sumsum is not to make you feel comfortable, but to challenge you to grow in African-centered consciousness. As the saying goes, consciousness precedes unity. Yes, Abakasem Sumsum will cause you to ask and answer the question, how will I live from this movement forward so that my life brings my people closer to African sovereignty? Yes, so this is a ritual that is designed to reinforce the principles and the values of African sovereignty. This is what African spirituality does. The rituals within it reinforce primary principles and values of the people and are designed to synchronize the consciousness of the people along the lines of those primary principles and values, which are also ideological and political. This is here because I am a Sematawi practitioner and Basu, which is an instructor of Sematawi, or what is often referred to as Kemetic yoga. And my teacher is a man by the name of Ankaku, who you see pictured here. And so within the practice of Sematawi, yeah, this is a ritual, or a set of rituals that we apply to our own divine inner cultivation. Yes, as remembering, spirituality is a way of life steeped in reverence to the divine creation and divine inner cultivation. And by the way, you might have expected me to touch on it on Haiti. I haven't, because it's the most common example that is used. So I figured I would focus on examples that are less illuminated upon in relation to the so-called conscious community, in relation to ideas of spirituality and nationhood. Yeah. But Brother Ankaku, in teaching us the role and the responsibility of what it means to be a Basu, yes, and a practitioner of Sima Tawi, says it has been affirmed that we are living in a new age. Yeah, we define the age. Yeah, they define the people who currently dominate world politics and economics define ages that are commensurate with their spiritual, religious, political, and economic goals and intentionality. Yeah. So we should define our own ages too. It has been affirmed that we are living in a new age. This age has been declared by Master Ankh Aku as the age of the rebirth of Black genius, or the age of Happy, the deity of the now. This positions the rise of Black consciousness at the seminal point in the recomposition of humanity, the reinvention of the power dynamics that govern the earth and ultimately the universe out of the peculiarity of our historical experience come the call for our people who are specialized in the skills to deal with the troubles of humanity. Yeah, could go into that further, but I'm just giving you an idea of how people are using our African spiritual philosophy to inform tradition, practices, and political ideology in today's world. And then I'm going to go to Neil deGrasse Tyson. Yeah, no, he's a brilliant scientist, and his political and economic and cultural allegiances are most certainly to the American state. But in relation to the relationship between science and spirituality, because African spirituality is fundamentally nature-based, again, steeped in reverence to the divine creation. So it's about the study and harmony with nature. Yeah, our spirituality is informed by our scientific understanding. And so in this book, yeah, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry, he has at the end of the book, he goes into what he calls the cosmic perspective, and some of it informs quite significantly what I've expanded upon earlier in the presentation. He says the cosmic perspective flows from fundamental knowledge, but it's more than about what you know. It's also about having the wisdom and insight to apply that knowledge to assessing our place in the universe, your Kinzungidila, your Lukosi. Yes, and its attributes are clear. The cosmic perspective comes from the frontiers of science, yet it is not solely the province of the scientist. Through our African spiritual systems, we enshrine our understanding of the universe, our understanding derived from our observations of nature, science. We enshrine that understanding in a spiritual philosophy, which is not purely the domain of those who are at the cutting edge of the observations, but is enshrined in a spiritual philosophy. So it becomes the way of life of the people in general. Yeah. It belongs to everyone. The cosmic perspective is humble. The cosmic perspective is spiritual, even redemptive, but not religious. Did the scientists just use the word spiritual to define the cosmic perspective? The cosmic perspective enables us to grasp in the same thought the large and the small. The cosmic perspective opens our minds to extraordinary ideas, but does not leave them so open that our brains spill out, making us susceptible to believing anything we're told. The cosmic perspective finds beauty in the images of the planets, moons, stars, nebulae, but also celebrates the laws of physics that shape them. The cosmic perspective enables us to see beyond our circumstances, allowing us to transcend the primal search for food, shelter, and a mate. The cosmic perspective not only embraces our genetic kinship with all of life on Earth, but also values our chemical kinship with any yet to be discovered life in the universe, as well as our atomic kinship with the universe itself. When the African says spirit, the African is referring to the vital force, the vital life force of the universe, the animating principle of the universe. Nature Papa Garvey says, first makes us what we are. Then out of our own creative genius, we make ourselves what we want to be. Mind creates. And as much as we desire in nature, we can have through the creation of our own minds. Being at present the scientifically the weaker race, you shall treat others only as they treat you. But in your homes and everywhere possible, you must teach the higher development of science to your children. And be sure to develop a race of scientists par excellence, for in science and religion lies our only hope to withstand the evil designs of modern materialism. I'm gonna leave that there, kings and queens, and just say Abibi Fahodie, Abibi Tumi, African liberation for all African people. All right, so that's that, kings and queens. I've gone through a lot. Yeah, I've gone through a lot, and a lot of that was primarily for the playback. Yeah, kings and queens can, you know, lick up the playback and go through all of that. But I've hope, yeah, that I've demonstrated at least to some degree, and there's more, because this presentation is in fact a work in progress. We're going to go deeper in future into things such as how African cosmology informs African politics and economics in very specific ways. For example, if we consider ourselves as a part of the universe, how does that inform how we engage resource acquisition and distribution? How does the concept of muntu or muntu unga bantu inform resource acquisition and distribution among people, which is economics? How does our understanding of cosmology inform the political and economic systems and communities that we develop among ourselves as a people? Today, I was given a very broad overview and looking at it in relation to how it specifically informed resistance efforts, yeah, in relation to enslavement and colonization, and I haven't even scratched the surface. So now I'm going to share the link here, and anybody who wants to come live can come live. I'm wondering whether I should start a new what's the word? A new stream, yeah. But I'm not gonna bother do that. Oh, shame. Sorry, kings and queens. Well, let's try share the link. Anybody who wants to come live, yeah, for the sake of questioning, for the sake of what's the word? Challenging, for the sake of adding to the knowledge, for the sake of, you know, even if it wants a shakara, you never deal with the thing proper, you know. You should have said this and you should have said that. Feel free to do that too, kings and queens. Everything bless. All right. So the link is in the chat now. Yeah, the link is in the chat, and anybody who wants to come live can come live. I hope ones have gotten something from the presentation. Yeah. And like I said, I've kind of distilled parts of a whole series into one presentation, which is the KIMOYO series, which you can find in the what do you call it, the playlist. Yeah. That's most unfortunate. Brother Reggie is unable to jump on and expose these deceptions. No worries, Talawa, when you're ready, and bigging up the Empress. I was watching Brother Omowale on Brother Obi's channel the other day. Sorry, this morning, and the Empress, you know, gave a very powerful and pertinent contribution. The link is in the chat, kings and queens. Yes, so anybody who want to come live and join, I can feel free to do so. Yeah, man, and I hope, like I said, I hope ones have got something from the presentation. I do realize that there was a lot in there and it was kind of convoluted, but the subject is about how our spiritual systems formed a political were expressed, yeah, through politics, yeah, and social realities, yeah, among our people in various different ways. All right. Let us see. Wagwan. Talawa say I come soon, so we're going. Let's wait for the brethren. Anybody else who wants to come through can feel free to do so. What do I need to do to stop sharing this? Ah, here we go. Yeah, anybody wants to click that link or come through. I'm gonna check any comments and see if there's any questions as well in the chat shortly. All right. So my brother MA says, Shakara speaks, I would like to see you write up something of a structured political social order from the guidance of your presentation. Yeah, this is something that I and others are involved in, specifically in relation to economics. Yeah. Because of the fact that the emphasis has been placed on communism, socialism versus capitalism in terms of our economic philosophies. And so there are many, such as Brother Ifayomi Grant, even Brother Robin Walker, and others like Mama Ife Amaduimi, yeah, who look at indigenous African economic systems and extracting the economic philosophy and principles from them. Yeah, Mama Ife Amaduimi is Igbo, and so she reasons from an Igbo perspective to begin with, but she comes from the Diop school, which suggests that there is a cultural unity in Black Africa. So she doesn't exclusivize, the principles to the Igbo, although that is her starting point. Yeah. So yeah, that is something that is a work in progress. I think where I'm going to attack it from first, though, is looking at the political philosophy that we extract from universal African nationalism or Garveyism. Yeah. I've been for a number of years developing a presentation called Was Marcus Garvey a Capitalist? Which is more properly, is capitalism the economic system of the UNACO? Yeah, so we're going to go into that a little bit more. All right. So yeah, give thanks for that, and I'm heartened by the fact that you have faith in my capacity to to fulfill that task. But that's something that man will have to do in collaboration and in dialogue with a number of other minds. You know what I'm saying? And I know people like brother Obadele Kambon, yeah, is engaged in that kind of work. I'm going up to see if there's any questions or relevant comments. Brother Kwame has a number. Africans, we must follow our own thoughts. Yes, I agree. Tell I said my the translation. Yeah, man, I'm quite proud of that translation, to be honest. And that is true, yeah. So brother Dr. Talawa, yeah, Dr. Talawa Adodo, sorry, is a scholar of Meduneta, yeah, the language of the Nile Valley ancient Kemet. And so he's working on a translation, a patois, yeah, translation of the various different Meduneta texts, yeah. And so yeah, man, you know, we'll let them work there. As you can see, I did my little makeshift example, yeah, of a patois translation of an ancient Kemetu text, yeah, in the presentation. I believe he's transliterated Keper here and is using patois terminologies that could relate. So guan, com, and tan, yeah, could all be translated as Keper. But the man himself is here, so let me not hold up the thing. And let the man himself speak. Greetings, King. You might have to turn off your computer.
All right, greetings. You can hear me?
Yeah, man, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Wait, hold on. Hold on a second. Can you mute the TV? You can hear me? Yeah, man, we can't hear you. Wait, hold on. Wait, can you mute it? Amma, can you mute the TV? Sorry, I have two devices to watch you know. Hold on.
Oh, wait, say yeah, I'm on big screen.
Yeah, man, you're on the big screen because I said no. Big screen conversation today.
Okay. Oh, sorry, can I just say Is Bijou? You know, I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Bijou, is it Bijou Noir? Is this my Haitian sister who has the channel? Is this the same sister? I don't know if you're still watching, my sister, but just confirm that for me. Every now and then I tune in, you know, and I'm yet to join your panel, but you're having some very beautiful conversations, and you conduct them in a very beautiful spirit. And so, if it is you, my sister, let me just heal you up, because I like how you're going, you know. But yeah, go on through, brother Talawa.
Yeah, man. No, I like the conversation. A very, you know, timely. Yeah, man. No, I like the conversation.
I'm still getting echo, you know. Let me mute myself.
Yeah, I think there's a slight delay, but you still hear an echo? Yeah, I think there's a slight delay, but you still hear an echo? Yeah, I think there's a slight delay, but you still hear an echo? Okay, hold on. I'm gonna come back out and then come back in.
No problem, King. Do you think? Yes, family. You know what I mean? Big up. I don't even know who all these people are. Big up yourself still. Oh, Reggie there, you know. Yeah, man, Reggie for come and you know, come and try and shake up the movements. You know what I mean? But I'm saying up on the plantation. So, you know, but yes, I think Reggie is correct in this statement, though. People have moved forward, and we are moving forward with our indigenous African spiritual system. So we give thanks. You know what I'm saying? We give thanks. We give thanks. Reggie sounded like Jesse B. Peterson. Big up Gold. Big up yourself. Moroccan Hebrew is Ishmaelite is in the building. Okay, if you say so. Talawa.
All right.
That's better. That's better. That's better. That's better.
Okay, good. No echo. All right. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. But no, I was there listening to you. A lot of thoughts running through my head, as usual. But the first thing though that I wanted to say about what you said about national consciousness is really important. The relation, because you know consciousness precedes unity. One of the things I realized, funny you brought up Neil deGrasse Tyson. One of the people who I think articulates the political implications of KIMOYO very well for the wrong reasons is I don't know if I think you'll know where I'm going, is Mbidi.
Right. Go ahead.
So,
Go ahead.
I have to say, because there's a little story about it. So I was in actually Mambo Mazama's class.
Right.
I came up with the concept of bedroom colonialism.
Okay.
in her class. She can tell you, right? So, and you know how she stay already. So
Yes, sir.
So I was reading the book for the class, and there was a part, and I'm like, I feel like, because I always have an instinct for them kind of thing, you know. When I call it beckification, you know, when the black man love off the white woman. That I have a whole, you know how I am about that. So by now.
Yes, sir.
So I'm gonna read it, and I said he must be with some white woman. And there's a passage in there where he's talking about the failure of, in his terms, African religion is that it doesn't have a future concept.
Which is false. Yeah.
Right. A concept of transcendence, all them foolishness, like the other religions. So it lacks a universal appeal. Now, why I bring this up with bedroom colonialism, because you talked about continuity, right? I think we would better understand the problem of out of black relationships, so-called interracial. I say out of black because that's what it is, right? Because it was interesting how he saw the political implications because I'm there with a white woman. That's why I think he saw it right away, because immediately he's not just looking at the rituals, he's looking at people organized around their own sacredness.
Right.
So he realized there's no room for it. He can't have his white woman and practice. So I love that example when you said it like that. So it's interesting. I just wanted to add that because I do think, unfortunately, with the bedroom colonialism, and I know you're in England, so See it all the
Yeah,
time.
go on. But do you know what it is as well, though? Because one of the things that we have to, as well as that, Baba Mbiti unfortunately was also to some degree conceptually incarcerated by Anglicanism, right?
Right.
And so in this respect, yeah, and this is not to discard, because that book for a generation learning about African spiritual systems, it opened a lot of people's minds, yeah, to some concepts that maybe they hadn't previously been introduced to. But when you grow, and even in the the presentation that I shared a snippet of from Mama Marimba Ani earlier, she explained some of the shortcomings of Mbiti's work. As you grow in your understanding of African spiritual concepts, the flaws in Mbiti will become apparent, right? This is what I'm saying. When you're studying the traditions from the perspective of the traditions themselves, yeah.
Right.
And I think that you've touched on the essential point, because of the fact that our nature of being is considered sacred within our own consciousness, and our oppression has desacralized what it means to be an African. Yeah, there is no African liberation, yeah, unless we are able to restore the sacredness of what it means to be an African. Yeah,
Right.
and that is expressed best in our indigenous spiritual systems. There is nowhere where it is expressed more emphatically and more practically than in our indigenous spiritual systems. And that is what I was hoping to get across in the earlier aspects of the presentation. And I hope I did a successful job in accomplishing that. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, no, man, you do your thing, but you're not easy with that translation, man. I was like, man, I'm slacking. I'm sorry, because but this is important, because when I see you do your thing and I see Obenfo Kambon do his thing, man, because I've been on a bit of a roller coaster, so to speak. Fatherhood coming upon me. My life start change up now, but
yes, sir.
Something about that text from Obenga, if you could pull up the slide with your translation.
Yeah.
There's something important there.
Wait, where you want the Obenga or the translation?
The translation.
All right. Hold on there. 2022, I see you in the back. I'm coming to you.
I think.
Fair warning, yeah. Tell her what. When 2022 comes up, we're probably going to get taken off course a little piece, because this the brothers from Ethiopia is very anti-Pan-African.
Okay.
So I just warn you. What's about to come up?
It's okay.
But,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm used to. Unfortunately, I'm used.
So are I. So we'll live with these things. We'll just agree there. You know what?
But I appreciate the warning. I appreciate it. But no, I also thought about, while you look for it, when you were talking about growing up in a spiritual household.
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, I was a victim of the Catholic indoctrination factory called Catholic school.
Yes, sir.
They want you to wear the nice uniform and all them things. So you know how that conversation goes, right? I think that's why I always found it confusing when people don't see religion as political. And when I think about the rituals they would make us do, and I think because some of my family members were a bit more critical, not so much, I wouldn't say African centered, but critical, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It makes sense. Completely.
I wouldn't do certain things as a child because I felt it was making me white.
Right.
I didn't realize but for a fact, they just think, because we're usually thinking about the social mobility, go to school, get your degree, get your thing, and you know what I mean? And that ritual part was so important.
Yes, sir.
That part, because it's affirming, because I'm thinking of all the things, the holidays, the whole thing, but the ritual part that some of them, they want you to engage in Catholic school. Like, for example, I don't know if England does some remembrance for the so-called World War. Yes. Do they have you wear a poppy?
100%. These are rituals.
Okay.
Yes. Me? Sorry, go ahead, because I meant to say this in the presentation, but go ahead. You
see, that's important though, because me, when I was in school, I dashed with the poppy. I I would take it and dash it away. I was the only one like that. So because I understood when you give into them, I think my problem was not having the, what our base is, not having a frame of reference. Having a critique is one thing, but I think as I've, through my life, I've come more into, getting a clarity of terms. But no, I remember what you said about that was very important. And the cleansing rituals your family did, because you had to navigate those spaces. And of course, I'm going to have my first pitness. So that's strong on my mind a lot.
Definitely. And you know what? I'm going to say this here, as I bring up Bunya and 2020. And then I'll make this point, and then we're going to touch on your point in relation to the translation. Yeah. By the way, 2020, you're on the panel. Yeah.
How you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm good. You're on the panel, but you're because your camera's not on, you're not showing on the panel. If that makes sense, but we can hear you. All right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
First of all, I'd like to say
one second. It's not your time yet. One second. It's not your time yet. Talawa, you want to say something about translation?
Oh, just a quick thing. And to your point about nations, right? Whether you're talking about Maroons or religious communities or nation communities like the Kumina, all of them have their own language. I think that's extremely important. The language part, that connection between the language and the cosmology, because you see here with the Kombi, with Kepler. Yeah. So I'm still working on my own translation of that text. So you're pretty close to it. It's pretty accurate. There's nothing really wrong. It's just one of the things, because what's important about Kepler, there's a part where it repeats. It says it's like Kepler, Keperu, something like that, but it repeats 3 times. But what you can do it in Tree, but I just don't know the words for Tree, but you can do it in Jamaican. It's something like carry all the thing them come. Come bring all the thing them come. So you see the way we say, or carry a gal to country. That whole flow of verbs where we chain them, we just link them up. That comes out of cosmology, because we see things as interconnected, and you see the rhythm of carry a gal to country, right? Even in the language, it's the assumption that it takes. So I think that's important.
100%. And just to add to that, because I couldn't say it fluently, but the rhythm of it is the same, and the words will be like ko and bra, which is go and come, and fa, which is fabre is to bring it, ko is to go, and it's like, so even the rhythm of it, to ko bring come is similar. Right. The rhythm of the thing between the patois and the tree is very similar. So we give thanks for that.
Because you just remind me, I forgot really quick, because it shows how creator and creation, there's no such division. That's what the verb chain allows you to do. But in English, you can't do that, or not in French either. And I think that part's important. I've just forgot that part, but I'll hold up. And
essential point that the idea that there is no division between creator and creation. Very, very essential point. 2020, you've got the mic.
First of all, how you doing, Shaka?
Me good.
I think, all right. So I'm not anti-Pan-African to begin with, and I'm not against any sort of political movement, right? I think we had a little bit of misunderstanding, to be honest, really. I'm not as negative as you would think I am. So let's just clear that thing now. I think there's a little misunderstanding. So I want it to be a positive criticism of the movement, like a supportive kind. Other than that, it doesn't really directly affect me, and I don't see really nothing wrong with it. Sometimes, but I just want it to be part of the conversation, and I want to criticize it, and that's it. That's about it. So don't think.
What's your contribution to today's discourse?
It depends. First of all, I think from what I heard, right? Like, I think one of the reasons why your movement is kind of weak is because why not build on like pre-established movements like the Rastafarian religion, stuff like that? Like, because if you start really small, like from a scratch, like African spirituality, like if you have many groups within the movement, it takes away from the bigger purpose, right? So why not like find a way to combine all of it, or just build on something that's already there?
That's exactly what African spirituality does. Yeah, obviously it begins by building on what already exists, and then it seeks to evolve what is needed from it. That's exactly what it does. So that's already taking place. In fact, you mentioned Rastafari. Rastafari does exactly that. Yeah, I mentioned Obia and Kumina before, and even as much as some Rastafari, but not the Obia, there would be no Rastafari if there was no Obia. Yeah, right. Rastafari is an Obia movement, right? And many of the early founding fathers of Rastafari will come out of St. Thomas, which is the central hub for Kumina. Yeah, the primary ritual expression of Rastafari, which is Nyabingi drumming, comes out of two ritual drumming traditions that are preserved in Jamaica. One is called Kumina, and the other is called Bodo. Yeah, and if you hear the Bodo rhythm, it sounds practically exactly like the Nyabingi rhythm. Sometimes just a bit faster. So that's exactly what is taking place.
Okay, but like, how about like more like the Protestant Reformation, sort of like take the big chunk of the movement within the African or Black conscious or political movement, take the majority belief and reform it, just like the Catholic, the Reformation, right? So that
Again,
way,
that's exactly what's happening. I wouldn't use the Catholic Reformation as an example, but the idea of KIMOYO or African spirituality is designed to do just that. So to emphasize the shared essential principles of various different African spiritual traditions, and create, or it's not even necessarily create, but emphasize the relatedness of them and making it functional through social and people organization. That's exactly what's taking place.
okay, yeah.
And this is important. Sorry, let me just say this. This is important because we're defining African liberation according to what it means to be an African. Yeah. So we're quite clear about our orientation. Yeah. So when we say, we're not just using terms like liberation or just black power. Yeah. Even we're defining, when we say African liberation or African sovereignty, we're defining the cultural lens, yeah, through which we are perceiving even what it means to be free, and what it means to be liberated, and what it means to be autonomous, and what it means to be sovereign. And I'm emphasizing that because I believe a lot of the backlash against African spiritual systems and their political application in today's world is born of the fact that not everybody has an African-centered concept of liberation or freedom.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. That spirituality should be one aspect of the struggle. I totally agree with that, because most people are, whether they know it or not, they're spiritual. So spirituality is definitely like one big pillar of this movement. It should be. But the way you present the ideas, like specifically your organization, it's a little more technical. You get even your PowerPoint, some of the language we don't understand. If I don't understand it, the majority of the people wouldn't understand it either. So rather than focusing on technical languages, the jargons like within the African spiritual system, why not just simplify it? Because I think one of the the weakness of any movement is having different branches. So why are there like Al-Qibulan movement, Rastafarian movement, Black Hebrew movement? If you find a way to just diminish everything and just make it one, it will be more powerful. So the way to do that is to focus. I agree with your message, the message of Al-Qibulan or everything else, but like I think one movement will be more powerful. And you said that this is basically a Pan-African movement, but like the messaging, the naming, the name of the organization, and it's just not well articulated because it's not united. I think at this point in history, what's required is unity, and unity meaning like unite under one banner, like one religion, one nation, and one race, if you want to call it, right?
So one of the things that that is important about the understanding that comes from African spiritual systems and culture is that we can have different ways of manifesting the same principle, and we don't need to do away with your way of manifesting the same principle in order to unify. We can understand, we're capable of understanding the essence of the thing. That's why we see the universe as a complete whole, because the universe acts in order. It has its various different manifestations, and the various different manifestations perform particular functions, but they all act in accordance with the whole and the all. Yeah. So I don't need it's not necessary for the Igbo to take on the Yoruba spiritual system in order for us to unify. It's necessary for the Igbo and the Yoruba to understand the relationship between the Igbo and the Yoruba spiritual system and its interconnectedness.
That's where I disagree with you.
Well, you're entitled to a disagreement, but it's not necessary. When for anybody who studied for those two systems, just as an example, knows that there is enough similarity and enough shared concepts for them to appreciate the inherent unity that exists between them, whether they action upon it or not. You know what I'm saying? That's just what it is. Yeah, I'm gonna come back to you 2020. And anybody else, by the way, who wants to come through on the chat, the link is in the chat. And I'm gonna open the door for my brother Bunya, who is over there. Yeah, over there, in Senegal. You know what I'm saying? So big up my brother Bunya over there in Senegal. Yeah, hanging out with all the real Africans. You know what I'm saying? You know, because a lot of these things. You know what I'm saying?
Big up, man.
Yeah, can you guys hear me well? Yeah.
Yeah, man. The Senegal internet are going good.
Nah, it's the microphone still, but yeah. Nah, the internet's been all right still.
We'll give time.
Yeah, hail up everybody on the chat.
Big up.
For the presentation and that. I didn't really have too much to say. Just that off the back of this little mini conversation you guys were just having just now, I know one brother here who is a Pan-Africanist, and he won out all of the Abrahamic faiths, and he's an African spiritualist himself, Senegalese brother. Yeah, he's a Serere brother, and obviously
that's interesting.
Yeah. I'm gonna introduce you to him maybe this week as well.
All right, cool. We'll give thanks.
And of course, the majority of everybody else is on are Muslims, of course.
Yeah.
But with a strong emphasis in their own traditions, right? That's very apparent when you get to Senegal. That is running through the veins of
to emphasize. Sorry, to emphasize. Senegal, for brothers and sisters who may not know, Senegal is the home of the Morid and the Bayefal,
right?
Which are what might be referred to as Sufi sects of Islam, but they retain a lot of their indigenous African spiritual system within their practice, and because of that, there are some Muslims who see them out as kuffar and shirk and outside the fold.
Trust me, brother. Sorry, my voice is a little bit hoarse because I think I'm coming down with something quickly, but
no problem. But I just want to contextualize that for you. Big up.
Exactly that.
You know what I'm saying? So go ahead.
Exactly that. If some of these brothers came down to Speaker's Corner, if you brought Speaker's Corner to Senegal, they wouldn't know what they're looking at. Like, they would panic. Like, for real. The man there would panic, boy. And there's no question among any of them, even in Gambia, there's no question of whether they're committing shirk or not. Like, they are being as they are, and they're proud to be as they are. You know, my first visit to Senegal last year, people then thought I was Bifal. Even when we were catching a coach to cross the border, the man are saying, "Yeah, it's the Bifal's bag. It's the Bifal's bag." I'm like, "Who are they talking about?" I didn't realize they're talking about me. And
when you look at not for the Bifal, you could swear it's a Rastafari.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but yeah, there's some interesting conversations that are due to take place in the yard, maybe over the next coming weeks, on exactly how to, because there's unity already, obviously, in the fact that, you know, I got brothers out of Mandinka and Serere and whatever, and the unity is there. In as much as there was always unity, but of course the state of Senegal has kind of compacted everyone together, but in a manner that is fairly fluid. You don't tend to see, I've not seen intra-ethnic conflict here in the way that I kind of saw a little bit in Gambia. If I'm honest, actually, maybe that's because it's a smaller state. Maybe that's because of some of the history. I don't know. I'm still finding out myself, but yeah, it's the unity is there, and I just want to affirm a lot of the things that you were saying, and in fact, in what the brother 2022 or whatever his name is was trying to say, I reject that also, because of course everybody has their unique take on the cosmologies that we share as Africans, in it, and you don't need to enforce anything on anybody, because the thing is already there. You know what I'm saying? Like, even you know, there's certain things that have happened in the last couple of weeks where, like, one of the things is I broke my ring, right? I'm wearing a ring, and it broke. And one brother told me what that means, and I know that it means two different things in two different cultures, and I didn't know that it translated in a place like Senegal. So it's very interesting. Let me just want to affirm, you know what I'm saying, the things that you were saying, and that.
May I ask you a question, Ma?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, like, based on your observation in Senegal right now, right? So the Muslim population there, do they practice a different kind of Islam from, say, the kind of Islam that you see in the diaspora, right? So, I mean,
in the diaspora,
yeah, like the converts or in any other part of Africa. My point is, like, are they more like loyal to the Ummah because or like the Black movement? Does that contradict with their belief system to be pro-Black? Because there are a lot of the problem that we see in Islam is there is a pushback from non-Black Muslims to force to suppress the Black voices within Islam. So how do you reconcile that, or what's your understanding based on what you saw there?
I think it varies, but the prevailing sentiment that I get from the conversations I have, and, you know, the reality on the ground is that I mean, the majority of Senegalese men, and it's mainly men I'm speaking to, in it, are fully aware of Arabs and Europeans and the role that they've played in the trajectory of the region. So there isn't, first and foremost, there isn't a veneration of sorts towards Arabic culture. That's the first thing I would tell you. You don't really see it, again, as I said, it varies, but you don't really see too much focus on that. And in fact, I don't know many Senegalese around me who are speaking Arabic. You understand? Like, who are who are fluent in it, who are being taught. It's different in Gambia from what I've seen at a local level. Obviously, there's a huge mosque around the corner from where I'm staying. But again, it's something for me to learn. In terms of the difference in the actual Islam, how it kind of manifests, my only example is London, right? And how I see things going in there, and obviously what I see on the TV and whatnot in Saudi Arabia and all these places. I'm confused by what you said about the diaspora, by the way, because I don't know which diaspora you're talking about, whether it's the the Ummah in general, or specifically Black Muslims in the diaspora? So if you want to clarify
Yeah,
that,
yeah, Black Muslims in diaspora. I
okay,
think that might include the Somalis and everybody else,
yeah,
people from Caribbean islands and stuff like that. And it ties to the what we were talking about earlier, in the sense that if this thing called Islam it's a way of life, it's a culture in itself. It comes with a lot of understandings of self and the nation. So if you are leaving everybody, well, you can be whatever you want as long as you agree with just this part of our goal. What if what they practice is anti-black at its core? Like, how are you gonna leave that to them to just because I think the whole purpose of this whole movement would be like nation building. I would assume. So if you build a nation that practices different religions, and some religions like Islam are an entire culture by itself, so that creates a weakness in any movement. I think that's my point.
but I mean, Islam is not going to disappear overnight or even in my lifetime, right? That's something that I have to stand firmly
Incorporate in your movement.
Yeah. Sorry.
Like, so you would believe, you think it should be incorporated and accepted into the Black movement?
Well, Islam Islam in this region is already not even incorporated. The African spiritual traditions and cultural expressions are already the foundation. They stand below. Sorry, they stand before Islam in this region, from my understanding. Right, Islam has come later, so the foundations are the traditions. You understand? It's not the other way around. It's not like the traditions are sitting on top of Islam. Islam is sitting on top of the traditions. That's why the traditions are so robust.
It's embedded in the people, right? So that I'm recording a video from Uncle Dan Juma at Speaker's Corner, where he was actually bemoaning the fact that there is a rise in the Salafi interpretation, so to speak, in West Africa. Yeah, and Senegal was one of the regions that he mentioned, because people are going to to Mecca and Medina and getting what's it called, qualifications, yeah, in quote unquote true Islam, right? You know what I'm saying? And so this is causing some friction between youngers and elders, yeah, in certain majority Muslim nations in Africa. At the same time, the answer to because all things are a process, yeah. And the reason why it's important to highlight and emphasize these various different aspects of the applications of African spiritual systems is because on a conscious level, oftentimes we don't regard our indigenous spiritual systems as having information and knowledge systems that can contribute to politics and economics, yeah, in the same way that we might do the so-called major world religions, right? And this is the importance of it. And so it's not necessarily, yeah, and various ones will find their ways of expressing themselves and so on and so forth. Those who are convicted by African spiritual systems simply need to affirm and institutionalize it. Yeah, that's it. And the brothers and sisters who are in whatever other spiritual system, well, we must compel them to respect the thing, right? And those who retain more elements of their indigenous spiritual systems will find their way, yeah, once we have institutionalized the thing, yeah, and are living it and are restoring systematically dignity to it and manifesting it in our social relationships, in our economic relationships, and so on and so forth. And what, like, so for example, when we want to see a big, Ipetito, yeah, which is like an African spiritual temple right next to around the corner from the big mosque. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Jump in quick.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, that's what we're doing at Afrocentricity International.
Exactly.
Abidjan, the African Renaissance Temple. That's exactly what we did. Because you see how the Prime Minister wastes.
Hold on there. Sorry, Talawa. Is it open now?
Yeah, it's running. It's running. There's still
It's
some
running
other.
now.
There's still things going on, but there's a space there. People hold class and all the thing. If you look on
All right.
Mambo Mazama's Facebook, you'll see it. Because I was just
No, I've seen it, but I didn't know it was open. I knew that things were going. I thought you were still building.
They have meetings. Yeah, them have meetings and all that.
Right.
But there's still stuff going on. There's still other processual things going on. Some other things in progress.
Yes,
if I'm telling you correctly, but that's important because that's exactly why we chose Abidjan was chosen, because it was the first chapter in the continent AI had established, AI Afrocentricity International. For those in your audience who might not know, that was the first thing, because it was just around the time when one of the prime minister, I don't care to know his name, I really don't, because I was disgusted by it, had Alibaba Center, or no, a Christ Insanity church in Bill down there. Yeah, that's what it was. So I just had to jump because that's important.
No, no, it's extremely important. For those who missed it, Brother Talawa is a member of an organization called Afrocentricity International, and they have recently opened and are still building what the African Renaissance wait name?
Renaissance Temple.
Yeah. So which is an African spiritualist temple in what is currently referred to as Cote d'Ivoire, yeah, in Abidjan, yeah, in the Ivory Coast. All right. And when we have, what we're gonna do, I gotta invite yourself, Mambo, Ama, Tamu. We have to invite Tamu upon the thing as well. Yeah. For come talk about it. Yeah. And demonstrate. I just give people an example of what the restoration of African spiritual systems in pursuit of an African nationalist goal looks like.
Right, yeah, and that's what I appreciate about her.
Yes, sir. Most definitely. All right. Anything else I go on? Oh, big up the Empress. Yeah, big up Kasu. Yeah, you know what I'm saying, in the building, and big up Amma, you know what I'm saying, want to big up the Empress them, in the background. 2022, I don't know where your Empress name, or even if you have Empress, you know what I'm saying. So when I go big up, yet, you know what I mean, cause yeah, sure you talk, it might not even be an Empress, so we don't want to preempt the thing. What's it called? The chat, yeah, the link is in the chat. If anybody want to come on the live, and if there are any sisters, yeah, in big up the sisters, them, if there are any sistering, feminine energy is very important within the African spiritual vibration, so we just want, invite the sistering them on the platform. So yeah.
But just one more point to add to the thing.
Go ahead.
I get a sense that you don't want to offend people who hold a different belief from yours. But from my understanding, Islam and African spirituality are like oil and water. They just don't mix.
So is Christianity.
But yes, I agree. And it's like either you have to be absorbed.
It's not about not offending. Yeah, it's not about not offending, my brother. We don't have to be unnecessary. We don't have to be contentious unnecessarily, and the power of African spiritual systems is not going to be found simply in our capacity to debate Christians and Muslims.
No, we don't have to. That's not
right. Yeah. So it's about building along the lines of African spirituality, of KIMOYO. Yeah. And where so in relation to our Muslim and Christian brothers and sisters, because we do have to relate positively and constructively to our Muslim and Christian brothers and sisters. Yeah, we do have to find ways of doing that. But the strength in that is to be found again in what we build and not just what we destroy. And that's the point. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. But remember, Bunya was discussing brothers and sisters who have African spiritual retentions, yeah, within their expressions of Islam, and I'm familiar with that because
Can he give an example of that? Can he give an example of that?
We just mentioned them, the Maulid, yeah, and the Bayafal. So if you Google the name Sheikh Amadou Bamba, yeah, you things will come up, yeah, or the Maulid, which is MOURID, yeah. You know what I'm saying? You things will come up, all right, about them. But yeah, you know what I'm saying. But then coming from the Caribbean, we have various different expressions of African spirituality, which are at their essence, various different expressions of Christianity, which as MA put it, that it's that the Christianity sits on top of an African spiritual system, right? And so many of us who come into African spirituality from the Caribbean first access it through our understanding of the Africanness of these spiritual systems, yeah? And slowly what we do is we just work out the Christianity, you know, just work it out. Right? You know what I'm saying? And we come to a new understanding, yeah? And so we have to be patient with our people, right? And appreciate that everyone's on a journey and a process, and we don't have to lambast people necessarily for not being at our stage of development.
Okay, well, you say so, but I still believe that those two things are not compatible, and within the doctrine itself of these Abrahamic religions, they are, like you always say, anti-African spirituality. So the bigger one has to absorb the smaller one to have just one strong movement, I think. Because if spirituality is important for the movement, this spirituality, the bigger ones should absorb the small ones at the end of the day, so that this nation that's supposed to be built will have one understanding, one doctrine, not different manifestations of different religions, because religion really could be an identity itself. And people who have different identities, uniting them just under oppression is not a viable movement. I think I'll stand by that.
So there's two things in that. The first is that liberation is a process, not an event. Yeah, it's a process. So when you don't achieve everything one time. The second thing is that the emphasis is on understanding the essence, yeah, and the foundational governing principles of the thing. All right. And so the process from an African spiritualist point of view, and I don't necessarily expect you to understand this, yeah, because you're not an African spiritualist, right? But the emphasis is on emphasizing the shared commonalities, yeah, within our indigenous spiritual systems, what is referred to as the cultural unity of Black Africa. So once we affirm the cultural unity of Black Africa, the sense of oneness and unity is established with that understanding and that consciousness. Yeah. And so when you talked about bringing together various different things, that's exactly what that does. But because consciousness precedes unity, we've been operating out of a lack of that consciousness, out of a lack of awareness, yeah, of our shared mutually beneficial concepts, yeah, out of a lack of awareness of the cultural unity of Black Africa. And so the process is about emphasizing and educating ourselves and our people about the fact of that cultural unity. And once we have got enough people operating at a level of consciousness which can assume what is called critical mass, yes, then the best of it will manifest itself sufficiently in institutional terms. Yeah. But that's about how we relate to ourselves and our own culture.
Does that include the Hebrew Israelites?
Again, no, because the Hebrew Israelites, for the most part, operate from a position of anti-Africanness. Yeah, so that would be non-commensurate with the thing. Now there are other Hebrew Israelites that don't operate from a position of anti-Africanness, and so there are avenues and ways to work with such brothers and sisters, even as we might debate them on certain levels, right? But the foundational principle is the emphasis and the restoration of dignity to what is considered to be African, indigenously African.
Yeah, well, that's good, but I haven't seen a lot of people trying to put a leash on this movement, the Hebrew Israelites, and I think that should be part of the community service, part of your organization's thing to combat the direction that movement is going.
And there will be those that do that work. My thing is to Prince Prime is focused on emphasizing the functionality and the revolutionary potential of African spiritual systems. I could debate a Hebrew Israelite from now to next week, and nobody will learn about KIMOYO. Nobody will learn about Ma'at. Nobody will learn about Kalunga. Nobody will learn about Keper. Nobody would learn about Hibre and Ori and Ashe. Nobody will learn about Izion too, of Southern Africa. Nobody will learn about Mweya. And you know what I'm saying? So we need to do that. That's what that needs to be done. And let the brothers and sisters who want to focus on tearing down the Hebrew Israelites do that. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure some of them will use the work of that ones that myself are doing in the process. I say it go. You know what I mean? I just say it go. You know? Last call, family. Last call, because we have Oman and Pitney for go hug up. And all these things. So last call for those who want to join the chat, because we're going to wrap up the show soon.
I have a question, Shakara.
Yes,
I have a question for you. Okay. I think I know the answer, but I'm curious your perspective on this. Can you, because I think it's not so much the answer, but how to explain it. Because I think I have a sense of why, but let me just ask you the question.
Yes, sir.
Can you be engaged in an African spiritual system? So let's say voodoo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, let's take that, right? Let's go with voodoo just to make it tangible. Can you be a voodooist and same time be a Christian?
This is a very good question. Yeah.
But do you see why I'm asking you that? This is something.
Yeah. And I would say no, right? Because from a Christian perspective, principally, yeah, there's a thing called sin, right? And pagan and heathen, right? And they would consider the Voodoo to be pagan, heathen, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Now, Voodoo doesn't necessarily engage in that kind of blanket. Voodoo doesn't define itself in opposition to other spiritual systems in the same way. Right, if that makes sense. Yeah, African spiritual systems tend to be, and this is a positive and a negative as far as the African personality is concerned, tend to be more embracing, yeah, of different spiritual systems. But because of the fact that Abrahamic religions in general and Christianity in particular, as far as your question is concerned, are hostile towards indigenous African spiritual systems, ultimately there's a contradiction there, and that contradiction exists notwithstanding what has been referred to as syncretization, synchronism that has occurred over generations among African people. But then we have to understand the context for that, what is called syncretism, yeah, which is the European imposing a spiritual system upon us and us trying to preserve our own spiritual system and coding, yes, our own spiritual reverence using the iconography of the oppressor, of the colonizer, of the enslaver in that regard. And so there's a process that we have to go through again of exercising that particular demon. And there are those within voodoo, particularly in Haiti, that are doing that work also. Right, so I think ultimately it's a contradiction, but
so the answer is no, right, Chaka?
So like, I've already said that. Yeah, the answer is no. Ultimately,
you should emphasize that, because that's a good example of how.
Yeah, but we have to also be cognizant of our current reality, right? So our current reality has given birth to certain things, and we have to understand how that situation comes about. We can't just disregard the reality to reaffirm a principle. We have to understand, how the reality came about in and of itself. I hope that answers your question. Talawa.
Yeah, that was a good question.
I appreciate it.
That's a perfect example of what I was talking about.
I know it's a challenging one.
No. It's a reality that we live with. I think that I think that we have to appreciate that contradiction is the nature of oppression. Yeah. And so for as long as we are we are oppressed, these contradictions will manifest themselves. You know what I'm saying? And we just have to go through the process of lessening and reducing the contradictions until they're non-existent. You know, that's just what it is. You know what I'm saying? But yeah. And I think going through that process will give us a better understanding of what our ancestors went through in terms of trying to preserve, that our culture in the face of whilst facing culture genocide. Do you know what I'm saying? I hope that makes sense to ones and ones. All right, nobody else like a come on the panel, so I hope that brothers and sisters have got something from this. I do understand that it was kind of convoluted, and so I'm going to work on fine-tuning this presentation because I've added stuff to it, and I believe I've even delivered it in a more fine-tuned way previously, but I just let it go. When you're trying to get through a lot and struggling for time, you know what I'm saying? But giving thanks to Talawa 2020.
Can I just make one quick?
Oh, go on.
Just as I'm fortunate to have a Congolese wife who speaks French, right? But Anglophones, we need to brave the francophone world. We need to brave the francophone world.
I agree.
And come out and yeah, man. Like English is out there as well, isn't it? Don't worry. You go to these places like Ivory Coast and that, your English is there, and we need to definitely, because I'm telling you, they don't know our reality because of this language barrier. They really don't know. They don't understand. And if we allow others to define our reality in their eyes, then we're going to be even more separated. So come out to Senegal and that, and I'll see you there, innit?
And I know you didn't say this, but I know you're going to affirm it anyway. Ultimately, we have to discard the colonial languages in general and communicate in our own. You know what I'm saying? So, in fact, I did there's another brother who's out there in Senegal, but he repatriated there from the United States, brother by the name of RJ. Yeah, and I asked him. I had the pleasure of interviewing him on Exodus Radio, with brother Chief Fodden. And I asked him about, moving to a francophone or a French-speaking African nation while coming from an English-speaking country. And he said, well, the language that he learned to speak was Wolof. Yeah. And so he speaks Wolof fluently because most of the people speak Wolof. Yeah. And that was beautiful because I asked him about francophone versus anglophone, and he centered the African language, right? You know what I'm saying? Yes, sir. And so I appreciate that. So that's important. And when you read, because Baba Sheikh Anta Diop is from Senegal, when you read, for example, Black Africa, the historical and the economic and
the cultural and economic unity of
for African Federated State, he goes through that in terms of how we begin to center our indigenous languages. You know what I'm saying, for a process, So
one of the beautiful things I've seen is I'm watching a lot of movies. I'm involved in cinema over here in Senegal, so a lot of them are in Wolof, actually.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah, a lot of them are in Wolof.
Go on.
No, I said most of the teaching is in French, obviously, but there are some co-ops here that are trying to ting in it.
Yes, sir.
And the Wolof is strong. Like there's strength there, and there's obviously development that can go on. But yeah, man, come true. What are you gonna say?
Nah, when you come back, you have to teach us some Wolof, innit? You know what I mean? I just say it good. So
one or two. Jedijef is thank you. Nagadef is good morning or hello. We learned a few more words the other day with our beautiful neighbors, but yeah, man, I will. I'll bless you with some more next time.
Quick question before you go, I want to see if your experience mirrors mine. I find that our people are most enthusiastic and willing to teach us the language when we return. I found that in 100%. Ghana. I found that in Sierra Leone. People are very, very where people were teaching me Mande. I went to a Mande village called Jama, and the people have said to me, when you come back here, you have to speak Mande. So they were very willing, to open my mouth and my tongue to Mandate. And I found that in Ghana as well, whether I'm speaking to Ewe, whether I'm speaking to Ga, whether I'm speaking to Ashanti speaking Tree, they're enthusiastic about the language. Is that the case in Senegal?
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting. When I was catching a coach last year to go back to Gambia, there was one uncle sitting down waiting for the coach as well, and I must have I don't know, we greeted him anyway, and immediately I said to him, what did I say to him? Something stupid like, I speak English or something. Yeah. And he said he didn't even question if I was not Senegalese. So why he don't know why I needed to even say that.
Right.
And then taught me some Wolof. And yeah, that's definitely the sentiment. It's interesting. There's obviously the desire to speak French fluently and English, but in terms of what you just said, yes, it's Wolof that's being offered to me on a regular basis. You know what I'm saying? So that's the prevailing sentiment, definitely.
Right. Give tats.
If I may ask everybody, just one more question, just a final question.
I think Talawa wanted to say something as well.
Let Talawa come in afterwards. Go on to it, 2020.
So do you guys think
I haven't had
like if all humanity spoke one language, is that more beneficial to the world or different languages? Like my understanding is like this thing, I think in the Bible it came as a curse, people speaking different languages, right? So would humanity be better off if everybody in the world spoke one language?
Well, in the words of Papa Garvey, Marcus Garvey said, there is no humanity than that which begins with yourself, and your race. So right now we're concerned with Africans being able to speak the same language conceptually. So the rest of the world can do what they want, for now, right? You know what I'm saying? But let's focus on Africans being able to communicate effectively. And that doesn't mean that we only have to speak one language. It just means that we have to be able to speak common languages or a common language. In that regard, that's part of the process. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know what is best
just
right now.
Don't waste your time learning African languages, Shakar.
Say again?
It's just that people who waste their time learning a language, I just feel bad for them. A new language.
Waste their time learning a language. You can never waste your time learning a language, my brother. Language is a mode of communication, and we should learn as many languages as possible. You know what I'm saying?
You already speak English, so I think that's really enough.
I already speak English. When I speak English patois, I'm learning Tree. And you know what I'm saying? 10-9 the guy man. You know what I'm saying? We learn as we go along, my brother. Do you know what I'm saying? And as much as we can learn and take in and get through it, we'll do that. You know what I'm saying? But we give thanks for the patois and people like Miss Lou who taught us about the Africanness of our patois. And so we affirm that without apology, fear or favor as African people. But give thanks for that contribution and that question 2020. Talawa, go on through.
So just quick, I just wanted to swing back to what Eme was saying. I haven't had the privilege as yet to touch West Africa. I've been on the continent, but not West Africa. When you want to learn anything about the continental cultures, I find people are always receptive to me. If I talk to Igbo man about Igbo and learning something, they're always open when you make that effort, because I think part of this inter-diaspora continental conflict comes from the fact that on both ends, we take too much effort in trying to fit in with Eurasians, Yoruba, or however you want to call them, more than we take that same time with ourselves. That effort difference. Like you see the band just asked a question about, England. That's the type of thing that has to change. And I think when we embrace our own sacredness as we grow in that process solves itself. But to the Francophone and Anglophone question, it's the same problem in the Caribbean. Most people don't speak English and French, right? But what it is, this is an institutional problem. What it is when you have to deal with government, you have to go sue somebody, you have to go, teach your kids, send your kid to go to school. That's where the issue is. It's an institutional problem purely. Not more than a social, if that makes sense. I think that's important to keep in mind.
And I would imagine that the African Renaissance Temple would be a hub, yeah, for centralizing the importance of African languages in instruction, in science, in mathematics, in law, right, and all of these things as well. You know what I'm saying? I'd imagine that as we affirm our languages through our spirituality, we also affirm them in every other area of people activity. So we give thanks.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to
that's
that conversation. You know, with Uno. Yeah, about the African Renaissance Temple. So we give thanks. Sorry, was you gonna say something, Tell
No, I was just gonna say because even in our system, the Caudillo Muya, right? We have our glory book. One part of it is
Yeah.
in Chiluba, and then of course for transitional reasons, we have one set in English, right?
Right.
So we have
Right.
that. So and then I know with Mambo Mazama, they're starting a chematology program down there in
Right.
Abidjan for like you can get accreditation and all that. And one of the things
Right.
we're trying to get going is to be able to teach in Kiswahili. So no, that language question is definitely fundamental.
Yes, I'm gonna bring you back at some point, Talawa, to discuss your PhD, and that work, if you don't mind.
Oh, anytime. I've been living under a rock. I had to come out of it.
No, yeah, but may I leave you alone, you know. True, say you have priorities, you know what I mean? You know, so what soon, did it? So when everything, and you become more second
Anytime. No, UNMA can send me message anytime.
Anytime,
Like,
yes, sir. You don't know.
Don't care. And Alma says she love hear you talk. So that probably puts her.
I'll give thanks.
Yeah, right. But that's and then even that relationship, like my wife, she's African anti-American.
Yes, sir.
So she goes with the Kanban thing.
Yes,
So I learned some things about Ebonics, right, from her, and she's also learning Jamaican from me and learning certain things. So even in the relationships we form, sometimes it just happens by who you hang around.
Yes,
you know what I mean, and who you have in your circle. So I don't think we should take that for granted.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Give thanks. Give thanks. All right, family. We're gonna done this, sir. Yeah. So give thanks.
All right, guys. Thanks for letting me speak.
No
big up
problem.
everybody.
No problem. My pleasure. Right. So yeah, we're going look after thing. And like I said, I hope one got something from this, and I'm sure this conversation will continue. But it's very important that we functionalize our African spiritual systems, yeah. And so we give thanks Tendai Mwali. We thank for unto the Mother, Father, Creator of the universe. Kudzai Muslim. We give praise unto our great ancestors. Abibi Fahodi, Abibi Tumi, African power and African people. Share.